Hello, so like all the other what ifs, this isn't mine, it's a fanfic. The link is the description if you want to check it out. Anyways, let's get into it.
Hello?
Anime demigod.
Here?
Naruto sighed as he finished his workout. It had been almost 3 weeks since Anko had told everyone that she was now the Hydra Sennin. She had, however, conveniently forgotten to mention her bloodline. Naruto had wanted to take out both Hana and Amaterasu, but Hana had been sent on a mission for the 3 weeks, ending in 2 days, and Amaterasu had been recalled back to Kami's court for a little while. Yujito, unfortunately, was not settling in as well as he would have liked. She seemed to avoid Hikari and Anko with a passion, and she usually opted to stay away from him as well. There had been no incidents between the girls and her, but it was still very tense. He just shook his head in disappointment and dispelled his shadow clones. He had come a long way in elemental manipulation. His lightning affinity was mastered to a Kage's level, while his wind affinity was easily Sunin, although not quite Kage level. He hadn't touched water yet. Luckily for him, Minato had several wind and lightning jutsus that he had learned as well. He didn't create any more combat seals, instead focusing on forming his chakra into the seal so he wouldn't have to draw it out, although the higher the level and the more complex one was, made it harder so he could only use Byakurai without fully drawing the seal for now. His speed was Minato's level so he could use the high ration for nearly 8 hours without much strain on his body. His strength was upgraded slightly with his celestial upgrade so it was now nearing Guy's strength. All in all, Naruto was easily Jounin level, approaching Umbu if he got more experience. He took a step forward and the world blurred out of existence as he felt a pulse of chakra from his avatar mark. He blinked and found himself in the same world that Susanoo tested him in. Susanoo smirked and waved at him. "Yo Naruto. I got a mission for ya," he said. Naruto shook his head smiling. "Okay, what ya got?" he asked, just going with the flow as he knew this was part of his agreement. Susanoo turned serious. "Shinigami has reported several necromancers summoning the IWA army that Minato Namikaze destroyed. We want you to destroy those necromancers and send those souls back to hell in the process," he said. Naruto winced. "I'm supposed to fight a whole undead army?" he asked, slightly skeptical. Susanoo nodded. "Well, yes. We want this done alone, Naruto. I will allow you access to the divine judgment, should you need it," he said. Naruto winced again but nodded. "All right. Will you give me the location and approximate number of enemies?" he asked. Susanoo nodded again. "They are on the Hakai no Higan, plains of destruction, and we estimate at least 10 necromancers and 2 of those are going to be high level," he said. Naruto sighed and nodded. "Understood. Why do I have to do this alone though?" he asked. Susanoo was silent for a moment before responding. "We don't want this whole mess advertised. You alone are easier to hide in the human world than your whole group. As it stands, you will have to inform Sarutobi and Tsunade of your departure. If all of your girls were to join you, there are at least 2 more people to be notified, not to mention the clans involved. It is simpler for you to disappear than for your whole group." Naruto nodded. "Very well, I'll set out in the morning," he said, gaining a nod from Susanoo. The world blurred again and he found himself standing in his training ground. He sighed again. This was going to be hell at home. Next morning, Forest of Hinokuni. Naruto jumped through the trees at an astounding pace. He was correct in his assumption that the girls wouldn't be happy with his mission. Anko and Hikari had been downright livid, and Yujito hadn't been very happy either. Tsunade and Sarutobi had given him time off after being fully informed of the situation, although he had conveniently left out the specific details so as to not worry them or have him followed. He sighed and stopped before running through some hand seals and summoning Komamura again. "Hello again, Naruto-sama. How may I be of assistance?" he asked respectfully. Naruto smiled. "For now, just keep me company on this journey. I may need you to help me fight later though," he replied. Komamura nodded. "It would be my pleasure, sir," he said as the two took off running again. That night, Naruto bedded down in a cave, dismissing Komamura after feeding him some fish he had caught. As he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but feel that someone was watching him. The following morning, Naruto awoke early and set out for the plains, once again summoning Komamura. They reached the plains by noon and stopped for lunch before slowing down and creeping up on the plains. Now these plains were home to a rare breed of grass that grew to be nearly 8 feet tall, easily overshadowing a fully grown man. So Komamura and Naruto would have to physically search for any clearings that the necromancers could be hiding in. Naruto and Komamura crouched in the tall grass. Okay, I'll circle to the south, you circle to the north, and we will meet up directly east of here. Naruto said before creating a cage bunshin with nearly half his chakra. You follow Komamura and create clones to watch the camps he may encounter. Understood, he asked, getting nods from both his clone and Komamura. They all blurred from existence and went about their jobs. Naruto searched the plains for a good 3 hours before finding the first camp. It was simple, a small campfire by a large tent with nearly 100 skeletons standing in rank and file. He observed for 10 minutes before creating a clone and ordering it to keep watch. He spent the next 4 hours doing the same to 9 more camps. However, when he came upon his 12th camp, he realized it was different. This camp didn't have a visible campfire, and the tent was easily large enough to hold the Isiraka ramen shop and then some. It had a hole at the top and green smoke was billowing out from said hole. He also took notice of the 300 skeletons, and the 50 extras that were significantly larger and had full plate armor along with broadswords. He made a note to attack this camp last. He made 3 clones this time and set them to watch the camp whilst he headed towards the meeting point. He arrived only to see Komamura patiently waiting and his clone nodding to him before dispelling. He received the memories of 8 more camps, although none were like that special camp Naruto had noted. He turned to Komamura who nodded. Nothing more to report than what your clone saw, sir. Is that all? He asked. Naruto smiled and unsealed a leg of deer that he had bought specifically for occasions like this. Nothing more. Well done and thank you for your assistance, he said, tossing the leg to the wolf who grabbed it and dismissed himself. Naruto sighed and walked out of the plains and into the trees. He swiftly made a small camp and set some clones to watch. Tomorrow would be a busy day. As he settled down to sleep, however, he felt like he was being watched again. Up in the trees, a figure with long hair smiled softly as it watched the blonde-haired demigod fell asleep. Sleep well, Naruto-kun, it said before disappearing. Plains of destruction. Next morning, Naruto awoke and quickly ate breakfast. He dismissed his perimeter clones and nodded, feeling that nothing had disturbed them. He then dispelled the clones watching the separate camps and nodded, noticing that each camp held only 1 necromancer, excluding the specialized one which held 2. He quickly made 600 cage bunshins and had them line up. All right, you maggots, he yelled, getting their attention. Listen up. I want 20 groups of 30. Each group will be assigned to a camp. The last group will be with me when we attack the head camp with those 2 necromancers. The signal will be the Hiryuji Kazaku Shintenreiho, flying dragon striking heaven shaking thunder cannon, launched at the main camp. I want 10 clones on the necromancers and the rest running interference. My team, we will be running differently, but you will receive specialized orders later on, he said, getting nods from his mass replicas. Good, expect the show to start in 3 hours. Move out, he roared, causing them all to disappear. The only sign that they were there, a pair of eyes that held mirth before even that disappeared as well. Naruto's team quickly appeared in a small clearing near the specialized camp. Naruto was lucky that these camps held no shinobi, as they really didn't have any way to pick out him or his clones. Alright, I am going to create 50 more clones. You all are to stall the regular skeletons, the extra clones will hold off those big guys. Naruto said, thumbing the hulking skeletons with full plate. I will personally take out the 2 necromancers. We attack in 2 hours, understood, he asked, getting nods from his clones before they all disappeared. He turned back to the camp and settled in. The clones would need all their chakra to fight those monstrosities. 2 hours later, Naruto created said clones, who nodded, and took off towards the mentally designated area to prepare for the assault. Naruto sighed and slowly began drawing the seal for his most powerful technique. It took him nearly 5 minutes, but he was able to ensure that there were no flaws. He looked to the sky and nodded, it was time. Quickly drawing on a chakra seal he had filled just last night for this occasion, he launched his attack. Heido no Haki Ju Haki Hiryuji Kazaku Shintenreiho, Way of Destruction number 88, Flying Dragon Striking Heaven Shaking Thunder Cannon. Naruto roared as a massive surge of electricity blasted forward and obliterated nearly 200 skeletons in one strike. Naruto smirked as he saw his clones rush forward and begin their assault. He nodded in appreciation of his clone's attack and made his way to the command tent as he noticed 2 figures make their way out of the, now collapsed, tent. They both had glowing green eyes and long back cloaks, however the right one had a silver outline and the left held a blood red one. They took in their attackers before glaring at the approaching demigod. "We are necromancers of the second order. How dare you interrupt the will of our lord? The Yamata no Orokai!" They yelled as one before throwing their hands forward and yelling, "Herifia," and blasting 4 balls of green hellfire at their attacker. Naruto's eyes widened and quickly dropped to the floor, dodging balls of fire. He leapt back to his feet only to see the red one constantly blasting his position with hellfire, causing him to dodge quickly. He glared at the man but glanced over at the silver one and was shocked. The man was covered in a green light and he yelled out, "Hon no Yorawi! Armor of bones!" His body suddenly became overcome by a bone-like armor, go figure, with multiple plates that Naruto could see would be very difficult to break through. Naruto cursed as the silver one rushed forward with high chunin speed. He quickly dropped into his Uriken stance and began a fierce taijutsu battle with the man. He absently noticed that the red one was now going through the same ritual and it cost him a heavy hit to his gut. Naruto grunted and flew back, flipping in midair to land just as the red-haired one called out his own armor and they stood before Naruto again. "Give up and we will allow you a chance to join the great Orokai. Someone of your talents would be of great use to him," the silver one said. Naruto growled as he felt a small pulse from his avatar mark. "Yeah, not gonna happen, boys. Let's take this up a notch. Titan Nobo-e. Titan's defense." Naruto yelled as his body shifted due to his bloodline. His skin became a dark grayish-black and red lines depicting a raging storm played across his body like a mural. "Feel honored. I haven't used this yet in battle and you have forced my hand," Naruto said as he dropped his resistance seal, rolled his shoulders, and dropped into his taijutsu stance. "Let's dance," he yelled as the necromancers charged him. This time, however, things were vastly different. Unencumbered by his seal, Naruto was running circles around the 2 necromancers, however their armor was still strong. Despite the few blows they got in, Naruto was winning by far. His defense was just as powerful, if not more so, than their own and he was able to push them back. He was doing rather well until their eyes glowed brightly and they started cackling insanely. "It seems our master anticipated your arrival and has given us the power to destroy you. Behold the might of the Yamata no Orokai. Damudo no Senshi. Soldier of the damned," they yelled together. They were both engulfed in a strong green fire and Naruto watched in slight horror at the 2 necromancers as their bodies were destroyed and all that remained was the bone armor and their own bones that quickly formed into a skeletal warrior the size of a tree of Konoha encased in glowing green fire. However, one soldier's eyes were bright red whilst the other's was an otherworldly silver. "Prepare yourself, chosen of the Anjuin. For we will destroy you," they yelled again as a large broadsword and shield appeared in their hands. Naruto paled and quickly set himself on the defensive. His clones had long since dispelled, and the new ability of the necromancers seems to have caused the skeletons to have crumbled to the ground. He absently noted that the other necromancers were pushovers compared to these 2 as his clones had taken them out without much difficulty. Naruto didn't have any more time to contemplate as the silver one slammed his sword down where Naruto was just a second before. Naruto quickly realized he would need help and pulled out a scroll before yelling "Kai," and letting 1,000 kunao pepper the area. Both necromancers turned damned soldiers let out dark chuckle. "Kunao will do nothing for you. Now die," the red one said. Naruto smirked, yeah keep telling yourself that, asshole," he yelled as the red one slammed his sword down, only to miss as Naruto disappeared in a flash of gold. Naruto smirked again and spent the next 10 minutes dodging their strikes while trying to come up with a plan. Nothing in his arsenal, at least within the time he was allowed, would harm these creatures, so this was beginning to look pretty grim. Of course, that's when things changed. A loud feminine voice cried out from above, "Suten, Suryuadon no Jutsu. Water release, water dragon technique." The large water dragon slammed into the red eyes one, which cried out in pain as it felt the water douse its flames to almost fatal levels. Naruto looked up and was shocked, there flying on what seemed to be wings of flame that left small embers floating in their wake. One was the woman he had seen in the one picture of his mother and father. He froze and was lucky that the 2 fiery warriors were focused on the flaming red head. "You boys better have a good reason for attacking Naruto-kun or we are going to have a big problem," she said, glaring at the 2 even as she made more hand signs. The red-eyed one opened his mouth to respond rather rudely when he heard, "Suten, Teppadama no Justu. Water release, water bullet technique," and he felt his flame go out. He cursed himself for his foolishness even as he felt his soul be dragged away to hell and the bones fall to the ground now lifeless. Kushina glared at the remaining soldier and said, "That was rhetorical, you attacked Naruto and that's your death," she growled out as the silver-eyed one began to attack in earnest. Naruto, who had been stunned by the appearance of his supposed Kaa-san, shook his head to clear it. "She can't be my Kaa-san. I have no parents, they are both dead. Besides that, I'm too old to have someone ordering me around," he thought before sweat dropping. "Well, except for the women in my bed, but that's a separate issue." Naruto thought as he turned back to the battle. He took notice that the redhead seemed to be tired and took into account her justice. He noticed her flicker her attention to him for a moment and he stiffened and then nodded. He needed to do something, and soon, if they were to get out of this alive. He watched as she flew through the air and quietly made his way behind the enraged warrior, all the while gathering chakra for his most devastating jutsu. When he had positioned himself appropriately he made a clone. "After this is over, collect the kunao." "No matter what," he said, getting a nod from the clone before it disappeared and began its assigned job. He collected his chakra and quickly ran through several hand seals for one of his newest jutsu. Raiden, Raryuadon no Jutsu. Lightning Release, Lightning Dragon Technique. Naruto yelled, pouring nearly all of his chakra into the jutsu. The soldier heard the technique's call but was too slow to block it. It slammed into him at full force and weakened him considerably. "My turn." Kushina yelled as she summoned quite a bit of chakra. Suten, Date Padama no Jutsu. Water Release, Great Water Bullet Technique, she yelled as 3 water bullets twice the size of normal slammed into the remaining warrior, ending his spell and causing his death. Naruto was panting, as was Kushina as she landed in front of him. He set himself in a neutral stance as he attempted to both catch his breath and determine who she was. He eyed her warily and she sighed in sadness. "I promise to answer all your questions, but seeing as we are both tired and, probably, hungry. What do ya say to getting out of here and setting up camp?" she asked. Naruto eyed her again but nodded. "All right. You did help me so I'll trust you, for now. But I want answers," he said forcefully, getting a nod from the redhead. A single thought went through both their heads as they headed off towards Naruto's previous campsite. It's going to be a long night, they thought. Naruto's campsite, that night. Naruto and Kushina had reignited the old campfire and had both unsealed food for themselves. After all, Naruto didn't trust Kushina. They sat quietly around the campfire, across from one another, until Naruto finished his instant ramen and set it down, leveling his stare at the redhead. "All right, explain. Why do you look so much like my Kaa-san?" he asked seriously. Kushina sighed softly. "Promise to hear me out before you react," she asked. Naruto considered it a moment before nodding. He still owed her for the help earlier anyways. Kushina nodded, adopting a serious look. "I am Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. The aka Shinku of Konohagakure and widow of Minato Namikaze," she said sadly, causing Naruto to freeze. 1,000 thoughts went through his head but they all came back to one question: where had she been? Kushina sniffled as tears started flowing down her face, actually surprising Naruto. "After giving birth to you, I was attacked by a man in a spiral mask. He was able to hit me with a time-space ninjutsu and send me to a pocket dimension," she said sadly before hiccuping with laughter. "Not before I killed him though," she stated. Naruto was strangely quiet and numb as he stared at the woman who claimed to be his Kaa-san, at least in his eyes. "I spent the next 13 years in a catatonic state. Every day I thought of you and if you were safe or happy. I stayed in said dimension until Ryujin was able to save me," she stated, causing Naruto's eyebrow to rise. She noticed this and smiled softly. "I was brought to Kami's court where I was faced with a choice. I was allowed to view your life and speak with Minato before I decided and here I am. If you want to know what the choice was, then I'll tell you. Just, please don't reject me. I can't lose you again," she said sobbing at the end, her head in her hands. Naruto was a bit shell-shocked, but he always hated seeing a woman cry and that, along with his ever-growing kindness, urged him to act. He quietly closed the distance between them and hugged her, causing her to stiffen and then relax, grabbing him and sobbing into his chest uncontrollably. "Shhhhhhhhh. It's all right. Let it out," he said softly as his own tears threatened to spring forth. A good 3 minutes later and Kushina had stopped crying and was able to pull back, wiping the tears from her eyes as she said, "Thank you." Naruto nodded. "I understand you can't be held accountable for what happened, so let's just put that behind us," he said, gaining a surprised look from Kushina. You're just going to forgive me that easily? She asked incredulously. Naruto shrugged while smiling. If I can forgive Jiji for what he did, then I can definitely forgive you for something out of your control. After all, hating you for what happened would make me no better than the civilians, he said. Kushina smiled softly. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she said softly. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You haven't called me Sachi yet. Am I to guess that this has something to do with your decision? He asked, sincerely curious. Kushina suddenly looked nervous but nodded. Yes, it is. I am still slightly uncomfortable with it, but I promised Minato, she said. Naruto felt slightly annoyed but shook his head. I am sorry, but if this concerns me, I would rather be informed of it now than be blindsided later, he stated. They had not moved, so Kushina scooted slightly away from him. Very well. Kami allowed me to view your life, as I said. She was of the opinion that you do not, and would violently refuse, to have your mother thrust upon you, she said, looking Naruto in the eyes. Naruto silently thought it over before nodding in agreement, giving Kushina a slight pain, but she shrugged it off, thinking, I'm not his mother, but I can be one again with his help, she thought, actually smiling fondly at the latter of her thoughts. She shook her head, clearing it before continuing, so she gave me an option. Return and attempt to be your mother, and fail. Or return and attempt to be one of the women you share your life with, she said, blushing at the end. Naruto's jaw dropped. Humana wa, he said as his brain fried. Kushina actually chuckled at him as he tried to reboot. I was rather adamant against the second option until Minato talked to me, she said, gaining his attention. Tio-san wanted you to do this, he asked incredulously. Kushina giggled and nodded. He convinced me. The night he sealed Kyuubi into you, I refused, but he eventually wore me down. He took you from my arms that night with every intention of you being returned to me. He told me, and I quote, I was the one to take him from you last time. This time, I want to give him to you forever, end quote, she said, smiling fondly at the memory. Naruto gulped and stood up, running a hand through his hair. He really said that? He asked, looking at her. Kushina nodded. Cross my heart and hope to die. He supported it 100%. Oh, and if you're worrying about our relation, your transformation almost completely obliterated that, and Kami gave me a bloodline, those wings, so we wouldn't be blood related, she added. Naruto paced around the camp for a good 5 minutes until he turned and smiled at her. I will give you a chance, but I think we should just get to know one another as friends first. After thinking about it, you are correct that I would never see you as a mother. I am happy you still wish to know me, and I won't deny you that. Besides, I think I would like to know just what Tio-san saw in you, he said. Kushina squealed and glomped him, yelling, thank you, causing Naruto to drop to the floor and reveal his celestial features. Time seemed to freeze as Kushina noticed them, and Naruto closed his eyes, waiting for the inevitable. He didn't have to wait long as a shout of kawaii. They're even cuter in person, came from Kushina, and she started petting Naruto, causing him to purr deeply. Naruto blushed as Kushina's smirk turned downright Hikari-ish, and she started assaulting his extra features with renewed earnest. Naruto had one thought as she hit a particularly sensitive spot behind his ear. Maybe I could get used to this. Konoha, 3 days later. Yujito had nearly gone stir-crazy when Naruto left. Over the past month, the tension between her and the other girls had increased. With Hana and Amaterasu away all the time, and Hikari and Anko both still holding a grudge, she hadn't really made any friends. On the friends note, her relationship with Nibi had been considerably strained, and she was feeling the effects of it. Her chakra was out of whack, her usual stamina seemed to evade her, and she could swear her enhanced senses were regressing. She sighed as she thought over her decision to stay here. It may be safe, but it certainly isn't homely. At least, not to me, she thought as she caught sight of Hikari tending to the flower beads like a housewife. All of the other girls are involved with Naruto on some level, but every time I see him, I just freeze and run away. It's like I just won't even give him a chance, she thought sadly. She knew she really should thank Naruto properly for his help, but she just couldn't throw herself at a guy that already had 4 beautiful girls hanging out in his house. She shook those thoughts from her head as she noticed Hana walk into the yard and Amaterasu appear in a flash of black fire. She smiled, hoping to connect more to the 2 canine females. She stood up and quickly headed downstairs, unaware of the coming argument that approached the nearly peaceful home. Yujito bounded down the stairs and burst into the living room just as Naruto's girls all came in at once. Everyone just froze as they felt the tension in the room. Yujito was switching her gaze from the stony Hikari and the hostile Anko even as they stared back. Hana and Amaterasu shared a look before Hana sighed and smacked Hikari and Anko upside their heads. "Didn't Naruto-kun tell you to forgive her? Leave her be," she said, being the mediator once again. Hikari and Anko both adopted a set face and nodded sullenly. Hana nodded in agreement and looked to Yujito, "And you should have tried to patch things up. It may be your feelings, but, instead of just hiding, you could have talked to them about their feelings about Naruto-kun and why they are willing to share him," she said, getting a mixture of a glare and a sullen look from the feline female. Hana sighed, "You are under Naruto-kun's protection, but you have to try and be friendly. We can't do all the work," she said. Yujito frowned in sadness and nodded. "Sorry," she said softly. Nibi was strangely quiet about this whole affair and was attempting to let Yujito sort out her own thoughts and feelings on being here. She may have encouraged Yujito to run, but that doesn't mean she would force her own beliefs on her container/friend. Hana nodded again. "All right. Now, how about we all sit down and talk for a while? I've been away for 3 weeks and I want to know what's going on," she said, smiling softly as she moved to the couch. Amaterasu took a recliner, same with Yujito, but Hikari and Anko joined Hana on the couch. Hikari frowned. "Well, Naruto-kun is out on a mission for Susanoo-sama, but we don't know where or what he is doing," she said, looking at Amaterasu. Amaterasu sighed, "I can't give out Kami-related information." Hana, Hikari, and Anko shared a look that nearly caused Amaterasu to flinch. "However, I can say that he will have something important to discuss when he arrives home in about an hour. I felt his chakra signature approaching the city when I arrived," she said, getting curious and appreciative looks from the girls. Anko nodded. "All right, thanks for the heads up," she said. Amaterasu nodded. Hana turned to Yujito. "Now that I think of it, what was your life in Kumo like?" she asked. All eyes turned to the feline female, who blushed and cleared her throat. "Well, it wasn't all butterflies and rainbows, but I did have it better than most Jinhuriki. You see, the Jinhuriki of the Hakusabi, Killer Bee, is the brother to the current Raikage and has built up a very good reputation as Kumigakure's protector. So, I was given some modicum of respect as they expected me to turn out the same way. However, Nibi-chan destroyed a good portion of the village upon her last escapade before being sealed into me, and this caused more grief than the Hakusabi. So, while I wasn't outright abused, I was often denied service or called names behind my back," she said, giving a very brief summary of events. Amaterasu nodded. "Okay, so then how about when you became a kunoichi?" she asked, genuinely curious. Yujito sighed. "Well, as a genin I stood out because I pushed myself night and day to be the best. I was given special training to control Nibi-chan's chakra, which was easy considering she is my friend. When I was promoted to Chunin, that is when I started having trouble. Both with the council and the civilians. By this time, there were rumors of corpses going missing and the dead walking. Of course, the first one under suspicion was me, seeing as I contained Nibi-chan, who has been known to use corpses to protect herself." This gained nods from both Amaterasu and Hikari. Needless to say, now we know Orochimaru is behind it. Anyways, the council members are old-timers from the previous Raikage who attempted to take the Byakugan. They saw this as a chance to make me, well, a cum slut as Naruto put it. They tried everything to trash my credibility and my reputation, but it failed until they took drastic measures, and here I am," she said sadly. Hikari frowned but nodded. "I see. I know you mentioned the Raikage, Killer Bee, Samui, Amwa, and Karui as friends of yours. Are they your only ones?" she asked. Yujito nodded. "My genin teammates didn't like me and dropped me as soon as I reached Chunin. I met Killer Bee and his squad when I went for Nibi-chan's training, and they were my first real friends. I know I probably made them sad by leaving, but..." She looked contemplative for a minute before nodding. "Kumo can't be home when I have to watch out for being raped 24/7 for the rest of my life," she said. Anko frowned and suddenly got up and hugged her. "Don't worry, Naruto-kun will keep you safe, as will we all," she said, smiling, getting nods from the other girls. For just a moment, everyone let go of their different ideals and the room nearly glowed with happiness. "It's good to see you all bonding so much," Naruto's voice carried out from the doorframe. The girls all looked up and smiled brightly, even Yujito, and yelled, "Tadame Naruto-kun." Naruto chuckled. "It's good to be home, girls. I have someone I want you to meet," he said before stepping in and to the side, letting a slightly nervous Kushina walk in and wave. This is Kushina Uzumaki and she will be staying with us for the foreseeable future, he said. All the girls, excluding Amaterasu and Yujito, looked at Kushina with surprise and then turned to Naruto. Hikari frowned. Naruto-kun is she asked, but Naruto cut her off. Let's sit and talk before I answer that question because it is very complicated, he said, giving the girls a look that practically screamed for them to drop the issue. Hana nodded and smiled at Kushina while it took Hikari and Anko only a few seconds longer before nodding as well. Kushina smiled, thanks. I appreciate you listening first, she said. Naruto smiled as well and said, as do I, Kushina, if you would, he said, motioning for her to explain. He discreetly dropped a Hiraishin Kunao behind Kushina as the girls all looked to said woman. Kushina nodded and steeled herself. While she wanted the blessing of the girls who had already captured Naruto's heart, she wasn't going to let him go for anything short of death or his own wishes. I believe it would be best to start from the beginning as long as you all promise to hear my full story before you ask any questions, all right? She asked, getting reluctant nods from the girls. She continued, I guess the best way to say it is that I was Naruto's birth mother. Hikari's, Hana's, Yujito's, and Anko's eyes widened, but she continued before they could say or do anything, I won't claim that I'm his mother, as it isn't true. Before you all ask where I was, I'll get to that, she said. The four girls each sat quietly contemplating what had been said. Yujito had been given a brief rundown of Naruto's life via Nibi, who heard it from Hikari. She knew that Naruto believed himself to be an orphan for much of his life. She frowned, as did the other girls, as they connected the dots. However, Naruto intervened. Please continue, Kushina-san. Naruto said. Kushina nodded and took a deep breath. I was attacked after giving birth by a man wearing a spiral mask. He used some type of time-space ninjutsu that sent me to a pocket dimension for the past 13 years. I was able to kill the bastard though, she stated. The four girls looked a bit skeptical, but Naruto and Amaterasu nodded. I was eventually rescued by Ryujin-sama and taken to Kami's court where I was given a choice regarding my future. This threw the girls for a loop, but another nod of agreement from Amaterasu confirmed her story and they kept quiet as per their promise. Kushina waited a moment before continuing again. Kami allowed me to view Naruto-kun's past and I was rather pissed. I argued with Kami and Yami for some time regarding my decision before I was given an ultimatum. Choose by the end of the day or never see Naruto-kun again. I asked to meet Minato, who I spent all day with, trying to figure out my choice, before finding myself, once again, in front of the court. She said. Kushina paused here and it was Anko who spoke up. You keep talking about this choice but you never told us what it is, she said in a slightly annoyed voice. Kushina looked to Naruto who nodded, I'll get to that. Minato eventually told me to accept Kami-sama's offer and I did. I was given a bloodline and had my DNA slightly altered so I would no longer have a relation with Naruto-kun, she said, getting a gasp and a glare from Hikari who figured it out. Yujito could have with Nibi's help, but she was oddly silent throughout this affair as well. Yes, I'm sure you figured it out. I was allowed to either try to be Naruto's mother, and fail, or try to be one of the women he loves, she said softly. Everything was quiet for only a moment before Hikari was intercepted by Amaterasu. Yujito was holding a conversation about Kushina's actions with Nibi and decided to remain neutral for now. Hikari had settled for giving Kushina a WTF you thinking look, but Anko, well, Anko was about to sink a kunao into Kushina's chest when a flash of gold appeared behind Kushina and Naruto's hands stopped the blade. Anko struggled to stab Kushina but Naruto tightened his grip and didn't let go. Naruto noticed that Hana and Yujito were quite tame and simply waiting to see how this played out, while simultaneously noticing Kushina's obvious sadness, before pulling from his avatar mark causing him to glow gold as he yelled, enough. Immediately, Hikari and Anko stopped struggling, but they settled for glaring at Kushina. Naruto pushed Anko away and glared at both Hikari and Anko, causing them to flinch away. We will sit down and discuss this like adults, not a bunch of Neanderthals. Naruto said calmly as his aura faded away. Slowly, the girls returned to their seats, with Kushina sitting as close to Naruto as possible. She may be a cage-class kunoichi but even she was scared of that many high-class enemies attacking her at once. Naruto smiled, good. Now, I believe it would be best to start with some questions. Hana, you may go first, he said, gaining a nod from said feral woman. He turned back to Anko and Hikari and said, you two, control yourselves, he said. Hikari and Anko felt guilt wash through them and silently nodded. Naruto nodded and Hana took a deep breath before speaking. I would like to know a few things. First, how can we be sure that you love Naruto-kun as a lover and not a mother, she asked. Kushina stared at Hana for a moment, her eyes going blank. I am not quite so sure myself. However, I do not view him as my son, and he does not view me as his mother. I do care for him seeing as he is part of my family, well in whatever convoluted way we are related now. I simply want the chance to love him as you girls do. If it doesn't turn out that way, then at least I can be his friend, she said honestly. Hikari and Anko frowned, but true to their word, were quiet. Yujito and Amaterasu were nodding while Hana did the same. Okay then. Second, do you still feel, well married to Minato, she asked, trying to figure a better way to put it considering Minato had been dead for years. Kushina shook her head. No, I didn't want him to seal Kyuubi, sorry about that, Hikari into Naruto in the first place and, through the years, I have come to resent him for it. Especially after I watched Naruto-kun's life. I won't say I hate him or anything, and I was married to him for a time, but I don't care for him as I once did, she explained, pausing partway through as she realized it was rude to not call Hikari by her name. She may have valued his opinion about the offer, seeing as it concerned their son, but she didn't really love him as much as she used to. This time, all the girls were quiet as they thought over what she said. Hana nodded again. Alright, that's fine then. Just a warning, attempt to treat him like your son and I'll kick you out of here faster than Naruto can use his Hiraishin, she said forcefully, gaining a nod from the redhead. She turned to Naruto. Then, what do you feel about this Naruto-kun, she asked, causing every single one of the girls to focus on him. Naruto closed his eyes in contemplation before slowly opening them and sighing. I believe her story and do not begrudge her for not being there for my childhood. I agreed to getting to know one another better, and would happily call her my friend, he said before trailing off, but, more than that is currently out of reach. I must resolve my own feelings and I have a hunch that Kushina needs to sort things out more thoroughly herself, before we go any farther, he said, actually gaining a nod from the fiery redhead. I would be happy to keep it slow, she said smiling softly. Naruto nodded back. In short, I'm fine with the way things are. I simply wanted you girls to know this as well. She will be staying here for now and I would appreciate it if you would all welcome her warmly, he said. Hana, Yujito, and Amaterasu all nodded. While Amaterasu and Yujito were both accepting of Kushina's decision, Hana was more borderline and decided that she would help keep the peace among the women, but Kushina would have to work on Naruto alone. However, this was not sitting well with Naruto's most adamant supports and lovers, namely Anko and Hikari. They had both seen firsthand what a crappy childhood he had, and the pain of never knowing who his parents were. When he found out, it was their shoulders that he had cried on to release his childhood despair. They felt that she had no right to even be in the same house as him. Hikari glared and spoke up. What makes you think you deserve the chance to be with Naruto-kun, she asked. Kushina's confidence had waned upon initially meeting Naruto and his girls, but after getting support from both Naruto and some of his girls, it had returned in full force. I have the same chance with him as any other woman and I will take it, she said forcefully, surprising the others. Naruto raised an eyebrow but kept silent. Anko answered this time, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you can make up for all those missed years just by spreading your legs, she said glaring as well. Kushina's own glare came into play and she growled at the Hidori Sennin, Hydra Sage, how dare you? I'll admit that I can't make up those years, although I would spend the rest of my life trying to. However, I won't, because it's not worth it. Instead, I want to be someone important to a man I care about. I want to look to the future, not wallow in the past, she said passionately. She may want to take it slow, but never let it be said that Kushina Uzumaki didn't know what she wanted. Anko and Hikari were livid at this point, but Naruto stepped up once again and the two girls backed down as he glared at them with anger and disappointment in his eyes. Drop it, he said, causing them both to flinch. Naruto sighed and calmed down. I understand your anger, but it is unwarranted. Please take it out on something else, not Kushina, he said. Anko and Hikari both shared a look before disappearing in their respective shunshin. Naruto sighed again. That could have gone better, he said before turning back to Hana. Hana-chan, I would like to take you out tomorrow night at 7. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to dinner, he asked. Hana squealed and glomped him, causing the other girls to smile. although Yujito had a slight pang of something hit her. She kissed him square on the lips. It's a date. Naru took you, and she purred as she turned and sauntered up the stairs, causing Naruto's eyes to be glued to her ass till it disappeared. Naruto shook his head to clear it before bidding the girls good night and heading to bed himself. Kushina and Amaterasu shared a look before giggling perversely. Tomorrow was going to be fun. Next day, 7 p.m., Animal Kingdom. Naruto had spent all day in his bunker/lab, letting the girls get Hana ready just like they did for Amaterasu. Surprisingly, Hikari and Anko hadn't bothered Kushina or Yujito and had decided to tease/advise Hana about the date. Thinking of Hikari, he rubbed the new Kyuubi mark on his neck. She had snuck into Naruto's room last night and claimed him just like he claimed her, although without the sex. Naruto had promptly cuddled with her all night, letting her know that he was disappointed in her, but not mad at all. Naruto had arrived at 6:45 to pick up his date and had not been disappointed. She wore a beautiful kimono that depicted a large brown husky cuddling with a small black and white rat terrier. Her hair framed her face, once again Hikari's work, and her finger and toenails had been painted an earthy green, as that was the overall color of the kimono. She hadn't worn any makeup, but Naruto always thought that a woman shouldn't hide her beauty behind cosmetics. Needless to say, Hana had been pleased with Naruto's reaction when he had stared at her for a moment before shaking his head furiously and smiling at his date saying, "I'm sorry, could you please inform Hana-chan that I am unable to accompany her tonight because my brain seems to have stopped working." Hana had blushed and giggled cutely before bending forward and pecking Naruto on the lips. She pulled back but stayed close enough for him to feel her breath on his face. "Hana says that you won't need your brain as long as your manners and mouth are still working," she said, smirking sexily. Naruto had simply nodded dumbly before offering her his arm. They had promptly set out for the Animal Kingdom restaurant where they had been seated in the Lone Wolf section again. Naruto and Hana had already ordered when Hana leaned forward, "So, I know a lot about what you like and all, but I still have to ask. What do you think of our arranged marriage?" she asked, curious. Naruto sighed and set down his drink. "I'll be honest. I don't like forcing anyone into anything. I only accepted what was said because we could both get out if we wanted to," Naruto said, causing Hana's good mood to falter slightly. "However, I was attracted to you when Anko introduced us, and I can honestly say that I would look forward to a future with you as my wife. You're strong, kind, level-headed, smart, beautiful, talented, well, the list goes on. But, enough of that. I know you have a passion for healing, but do you have any hobbies?" he asked. Hana blushed but took a sip of her liquid courage sake, and tried to control her blushing. Well, I have a passion for helping animals as well, but my hobby," she paused and thought for a moment, "well, I would have to say sunbathing," she said, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow and Hana to blush. "I just love the way the sun feels on my skin. It's so warm and powerful. I could lay in the sun all day if I had the chance," she said, getting excited talking about one of her favorite pastimes. Naruto chuckled, "So, I guess I will have to take you sunbathing sometime. I know this cute little clearing near a waterfall that gets the perfect amount of sun every day," Naruto said, smirking. He nearly sweat dropped as he saw stars in her eyes as she yelled, "Really?" Naruto nodded. "Yes, I'd love to," he said, smiling. Hana quickly hugged him and kissed him again, causing a goofy grin to spread across his face and Hana to blush as their food soon arrived. They spent the remainder of the evening simply chatting about several different things, mostly ninja-related issues. They stayed away from discussing Kushina or Yujito though, and that was a good thing. As they were leaving, however, Naruto spoke softly to the manager before walking his date home. As they reached the second floor, a repeat of Amaterasu's date occurred as Hana and Naruto made out furiously and ended in Naruto asking Hana out on another date soon. Hana had promptly kissed him again before heading to bed and squealing in excitement, causing Naruto to chuckle. As he headed upstairs, Naruto was unaware of the two golden eyes staring at him as the owner thought, "No more waiting, I will have you, Naruto-kun," before disappearing into the shadows. Namikaze Estates, next morning, Naruto's room. Warning. Lemon starts here. Please skip to next bold line if you are not of age. Naruto felt like his body was on fire. He squirmed a bit to put it out but instead woke up only to feel a small sheen of sweat covering his aching body. It took him only a split second to realize why his body was this way. He was horny. Unfortunately, he didn't have any more time to think about that as he moaned aloud. He looked down only to find his sheets bobbing up and down. "Okay, So Hikari already made up with me. Hana and Amaterasu aren't at this stage yet, and of course Yujito and Kushina wouldn't be doing this so. Naruto didn't get to finish his thought as the sheets were thrown off his body and he was treated to the most erotic sight he had ever woken up to. Anko was sucking and licking his cock like a 10-inch lollipop, while massaging his balls with one hand and holding his hips down with another. She stopped for only a moment and smiled sexily, with his cock still in her mouth, before deep-throating him and humming, causing the already horny Naruto to loudly proclaim, "Anko-chan coming." Anko mentally smirked and pulled back to his lower head before getting her first taste of Naruto's seed. It held a sort of sweet taste to it, although it was somewhat salty, and she happily gobbled it down. Naruto was breathing hard as he came off his orgasm, and yet he could still feel the heat from his body building for sex once again. He looked down as Anko gulped the last of his essence and his cock nearly sprang back to life at the sexy smile she wore. "Did Naruto come like waking up to having his cock sucked?" she asked. Naruto chuckled, yes I did. "However, would you mind explaining why you're here and why nobody heard us?" he asked as Anko crawled up next to him and let her hands wander his toned body. Anko smirked as she felt Naruto's own hands begin to trail up her body, lightly brushing her breasts and nipples before searching for other erogenous areas. "I put up one of those silencing and barrier seals, for the sound. I also left a note that you would be training for most of the morning. As for why I'm here..." She let it trail off as she moaned when he stuck 2 fingers into her sopping wet cunt. Naruto smirked and began to pleasure his lover, while adding his mouth to her right nipple and his hand to the entirety of her left breast. She moaned loudly under his ministrations, but this isn't what she wanted. She quickly flipped him on his back and growled lightly before biting him on his left shoulder, causing him to yelp in pain. "I'm here to fuck you senseless. You already had Hikari-chan, so it's my turn. And I will get what I want, one way or another," she said, smirking as she felt his cock go rigid and his eyes go wide with lust and shock. What did you do?" Naruto asked as he winced. His cock was burning up. He could feel the blood throbbing through his body and he felt his cock strain to enter the female on top of him. Anko smirked sexily and lowered herself so that Naruto's cock was between their stomachs and began to lightly apply pressure. "I forgot to mention that with the Hydra contract, I gained a bloodline. I am able to create poisons for torture. However, I am also able to create very powerful aphrodisiacs, which I can tell you are cursing me for right now," she said. Naruto growled lightly, but it turned into a whimper as his hips bucked and he tried to enter his lover. Anko bent closer to his ear. "Release your other features and promise to fuck me till I'm satisfied and I'll ride you like there's no tomorrow," she whispered sexily into his ear. Needless to say, Naruto happily obliged and Anko smirked and she rocked back to her knees before grabbing Naruto's cock and placing it at her entrance. "Don't move until I say so," she said, gaining a nod from her blonde-haired Adonis. She slowly slid down and engulfed Naruto's cock in her tight love hole. While Hikari's had been a perfect fit, Naruto could feel Anko's pussy regularly pulsing almost every 3 seconds or so. Her walls would contract and give him a pleasurable squeeze. Anko cried out in pleasure as he bottomed out inside her pussy, his tip pushing against her cervix. She slowly rolled her hips, with Naruto moaning aloud before smirking at him yet again. "You're amazing, Naruto-kun," she said, as she couldn't stand teasing him any longer. She put her hands on his chest and began to rise and fall on his cock, but his hips eagerly matching a furious pace. While Naruto had kept it somewhat slow with Hikari, Anko wanted no such thing and happily cried out in pleasure as his cock buried itself into her cervix with every thrust. Naruto was floating high on a mixture of an aphrodisiac and Anko's actions. She had thoroughly turned him on, and her pussy was amazing to say the least. In addition to the rhythmic pulsing, her pussy seemed to have these ridges that massaged him as he entered and exited. He was having a hard time not just ramming into her and filling her with his seed before she climaxed. So, he set his hands into play and began to massage and tease Anko's breasts. This gained him a loud moan from the purple-haired Hidori, and Naruto smirked as he doubled his actions, attempting to give his lover an orgasm she wouldn't forget. Anko was indeed well on her way to said orgasm. Naruto's well-endowed cock was stretching her to her limits, although pleasurably so. She could feel a slight amount of hot precum coating her cervix and his actions on her breasts were causing her vision to become blurry as she continued to impale herself upon the man she loved. She could feel her pussy squeezing Naruto, giving her pleasure as well, and the small ridges that seemed to be as sensitive as her cervix. She shifted slightly as she felt Naruto's cock go rigid and slammed herself down, realizing too late that this new angle brushed against her G-spot. Naruto's eyes widened as Anko's pussy clamped down on him and she screamed in pleasure. It was too much for him as the tip of his cock found its way into her womb. He growled aloud as his baby batter began to paint her womb white. He grabbed her hips and held her to him as he continued to give his lover the precious liquid she had tried so hard to obtain. He could feel the ridges in her pussy massaging his cock to get as much of his seed as possible, and he happily supplied it. Anko threw her head back as he brushed her G-spot and pierced her cervix and screamed in pleasure. She felt her pussy clamp down on his cock and her vision go white as she felt the hot cream pour into her womb like a fountain. She moaned softly as she felt it fill her and prolong her orgasm. She could feel her ridges as they massaged him and the way his cock throbbed before depositing more of his baby batter into her most holy place. She smiled softly as she felt him tapering off and her own orgasm slowing down. She silently collapsed on top of him. End of lemon. You are safe. Smiley face. After their orgasms, Naruto chuckled. Well, that was certainly a walk-up call I'd like to get again, he said. Anko just moaned in agreement and snuggled into his chest. Naruto noticed her neck and his avatar mark glowed as he bit down on her. Anko winced but had been warned by Hikari, so she bit Naruto right where Hikari had. After letting go, Naruto's mark formed into a beautiful golden wolf on her collar. Anko's, however, had formed an 8-headed hydra that had curled together with the 9-tailed fox. Anko, however, smiled at her handiwork. She had no problem with sharing with Hikari. Mine. Naruto said softly as he cuddled with his newest mate. Anko just smiled in contentment. They took a nap and awoke 3 hours later at noon. They headed downstairs but were disturbed by Hikari, who smiled knowingly at Anko before turning to Naruto. Naruto-kun. There's an umbu at the door for you and Yujito-san, she said. Naruto nodded and headed downstairs only to find all the girls waiting for him. He stepped to the door and the cat umbu nodded. Naruto Uzumaki, you and Yujito nii have been summoned by the Hokage. The Raikage has arrived with his delegation regarding Yujito nii's situation. Please come soon, she said before disappearing. Naruto turned to his girls, and a shocked-looking Yujito, before nodding. Yujito and I will go. The rest of you, please wait here, he said, gaining understanding nods from his lovers/soon-to-be lovers. Naruto turned to Yujito and held out his hand. She looked scared but Naruto smiled warmly. Don't worry, I'll protect you, he said. Yujito gulped and, with mental courage from Nibi, took his hand before they disappeared. Yujito was highly anxious, and nervous, about meeting her friends and former leader. She didn't leave any notes or explanations behind and she knew that Samui, at least, would be furious with her. Naruto, on the other hand, was mentally preparing himself for several scenarios. One was that the Raikage would demand Yujito's return. This would never be allowed, by Naruto, unless the council was removed. Obviously, this would be the worst option. Another was that the Raikage would endorse her departure and she could take up residence, legally, in Konoha. This was the best option. Yet another scenario, Yujito could choose to return of her own free will. Hopefully, she wouldn't choose this option without some major changes in regard to her safety. Several other scenarios raged between these choices and Naruto was trying to be prepared for anything. Naruto and Yujito soon appeared in front of the Hokage Tower. Yujito's eyes began to flirt around nervously, so Naruto quickly stepped closer and gave her a one-arm hug. It'll be okay, Yujito-chan. Just remember, you left to protect yourself, you haven't given up any secrets, and you still care for these people, and they care for you. Trust me, and trust them to do what is best for you, he said soothingly. Indeed, kitten. He is right. You are justified in your actions. Nibi spoke up, her voice back to the caring tone it had held nearly a month ago. Nibi-chan. I'm sorry about the way I've acted. I realize that I've been rather rude to Naruto-kun, and he doesn't deserve that. Yujito mentally said to her tenant, causing a wave of warmth to spread through her body and her weariness to fade as they synchronized once again. I am glad to see you have come to your senses regarding Naruto-kun. As long as you give him a chance, that is all I ask. However, now is not the time for that. Focus on the task ahead. Nibi stated, getting a mental nod from her container. Perhaps, once she has settled in, I can finally be more than just her mental guide. Nibi thought as she watched her container step inside the tower. Naruto walked up to the secretary, who immediately bowed her head to the Namikaze. The Hokages are waiting for you, Uzumaki-san, nii-san. Please head straight up, she stated. Naruto and Yujito nodded their heads in thanks and quickly ascended the stairs. Naruto knocked on the door and received the signal to enter. He looked to Yujito, who steeled herself, and nodded before opening the door. Naruto immediately noticed the tense atmosphere of the room, and most of it coming from the two brothers who could pass for professional bodybuilders. He was immediately wary of them as he noticed one was actually wearing the Raikage robes and the other was emitting chakra that few could match, for that matter, only himself. Amaterasu, Hitomi, Sarutobi, and Jiraiya came close to him. He noticed the small version of Tsunade and nearly flinched at the fury in her eyes. She was strong, that much was for certain. The other two, the dark-skinned genin, seemed embroiled in a small argument that ended with the boy face down, from a fist to his head. Naruto resisted the urge to sweat drop as it resembled what could have been if he had never gotten his father's sealing notes. When Yujito stepped into the room, you could have cut the tension with a knife. Tsunade and Sarutobi were silently prepping for a fight, with Jiraiya hiding in the nearby banister so he could help. She smiled nervously and waved at everyone saying, "How's it going?" The room was still silent until the mini Tsunade spoke up with disbelief in her voice. "How's it going?" she asked, obviously distressed. "You run away from the village, now of all times. You give the council a flat-out reason to turn you into a slave and you ask how we are doing," she continued, becoming angry at the end. "You leave without a word to anyone and we have to find out from a freaking messenger pigeon that you've sought refuge in Konoha. How the hell do you think we are doing?" she roared at her surrogate sister, taking a step towards her. Yujito didn't flinch and only the cage-level shinobi of the room noticed Naruto move between the two women. "He's fast," came the collective thought from every shinobi in the room. "Please refrain from making threatening gestures to my guest. I have promised her my protection and support. I will not allow you to hurt her whilst she is in my care," Naruto said calmly as he glared slightly at the blonde kunoichi. Yujito put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Naruto-kun, but I can handle Nasan myself," she said softly. Naruto simply gave her a soft look over his shoulder before stepping aside. She gave him an appreciative look before turning to Samui and frowning. "I didn't have time to tell you that I was leaving, and my apartment was booby-trapped so I couldn't leave a note. You all know the council has been rather persistent and I'm assuming that A.E. has informed you of just why I sought protection elsewhere," she said, getting flinches from the genin and sad looks from the two brothers. She turned to the Raikage. "Raikage-sama, you have always done your best to help me, and for that I am grateful. However, even you cannot protect me all the time. If you have come here to order me back, you will have to drag me back kicking and screaming," she said seriously, shocking her friends. Just when the genin were about to speak up, A.E. held up his hand, silencing them. "I wish I could tell you to simply remain here, however, the council will give me all sorts of hell and taxes and embargoes until you are returned and put under their command," he said, causing frowns to grace the elder Konoha shinobi's lips. Yujito flinched and Naruto took a protective step towards her, causing a brief smile to appear on A.E.'s face. "I will not do such a thing. As a matter of fact, I believe it is time to cut off their access to our mission assignments. Especially the seduction missions," he said, causing smiles to appear on everyone's faces. "Yo bro. That sounds really cool yo." Killer B added, before turning to Yujito. "Two is here coolio? Or do I need to go 8-0, he asked. Yujito shook her head at his rapping and Naruto seemed a bit bug-eyed from it. Still, it was better than green spandex and flames of youth. "TM, no B, it's fine. Naruto-kun here has been very sweet," she said, sending him a brief smile, "and, while I was off to a rough start, I think I could end up staying here for good," she said. The genin were shell-shocked and Karui was the first to snap OU of it. "Bulletin but Yujito-chan. Kyumo is your home," she said. Naruto frowned, as did the other Konoha ninjas, even the Raikage and his brother had slight frowns. Yujito sighed, "How can Kyumo be my home when I have to watch my back 24/7 just so I don't get raped?" she asked, causing the genin to frown as well and think a bit more. "I'll admit that I have heard some pretty bad stuff about Konoha's own Jinhiriki, but at least he doesn't have to worry about rape. I'll take isolation over sexual assault any day," she said seriously, sparing a glance at Naruto. The genin knew she had them beat with this. There was no counter for rape. Sarutobi shot a look to the Raikage who suddenly smirked like a fox. "Yujito and I have one last mission for you," he said, causing everyone to stare at him. She silently nodded, wondering what her leader was up to. I am giving you a SS rank seduction mission to improve relations between Konoha and Kyumo, he said, causing a cry of shock and outrage from the Kyumo genin. Yujito and Naruto both frowned but kept silent, while the Konohanins were mostly confused, sans the Sandaime that is. Silence, he stated loudly, causing the genin to quiet. Your mission is to seduce the heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans, Naruto Uzumaki. Should you accept, you will remain by his side and, eventually, bear him children, so we can spoil them rotten. Do you accept, he said, smirking at his joke and the blush on Yujito's face. Everyone, again sans the Sandaime, was in shock. They all tried to wrap their heads around what just happened when Yujito spoke. May I have some time to think about it, she asked. Nodded, we will be in town for the week. I will need your answer soon, he said, getting a nod from the feline female. Should you decide to decline, however, I will be forced to attempt to retrieve you to Kyumo. I will try to clean things up if this happens, but I can't make any substantial promises, he said, again getting a nod from the female. Yujito turned to Naruto, who nodded as he realized what she wanted. He put a hand on her shoulder and they silently shunshined away. Sarutobi looked to and smirked. I think we have the beginnings of a beautiful treaty, he said. Smirked, just make sure that boy treats Yujito-chan well. If I hear anything negative about him then he'll be dead faster than Minato's Hiration, he replied. Samui glared at her leader. How could you give Yujito such a mission? And what the hell are you talking about, she asked. Sighed and Killer Bee stepped forward. 2 needs protection yo, she'll get it if she stays with Naruto, he rapped, causing everyone to sweat drop or sigh. Sarutobi spoke up next. Indeed. I had originally sought a political marriage, but the Raikage informed me that the council would never allow it, seeing as they want her. So, we cooked up the seduction mission as a way to keep her safe. Whilst she is actively on a SS class mission, the council cannot recall her unless another great war breaks out. Even then, if Konoha and Kyumo are allies, then they will be extremely hesitant to return such a key point of any treaty we make, he answered. Tsunade and Jiraiya nodded at the sound logic and political maneuvering, as did Amwa and Karui, but Samui was far more volatile when it came to her surrogate sister. Although that is true, what happens if this Naruto character decides that, since she's on a mission, he can just rape her and get away with it? She half yelled. She almost lost a head from Tsunade's fist, which Jiraiya stopped. Insult my godson's morals again and you'll lose your head, girl, she yelled at the cowering genin. Sarutobi also glared at her, although Killer Bee and were oddly silent as they listened in. Please refrain from judging Naruto before you get to know him, Samui-san. He has one of the strongest, if not the strongest, moral character I have ever had the pleasure of encountering. His childhood was not good and he treats anybody that shows him kindness as if they were gods, and that goes doubly so for females, he said. Samui huffed. Fine. I'll reserve my judgment until after I see how he treats her, she said indignantly before storming out with her teammates. Sarutobi sighed and looked to He nodded. I'll have her teammates at least keep her from doing something rash. Good luck with your paperwork. Glad I could take a vacation from that atrocious job, he growled out as he stepped out of the room with his brother. The 3 Konohanins chuckled. It was good to know a clone jutsu that could transfer memories. Namikaze Estates, next morning, 10 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, Yujito had promptly ran for her room, saying she needed to be alone. Naruto had readily explained her situation to his girls before they all retired for the night. She had quickly locked her door and sat down on her bed in deep contemplation. She had seen right through her leader's words. He wanted her to stay here and be safe. The supposed mission could probably be completely ignored if she wanted to. However, the question wasn't if she was going to accept the mission or not, but rather, would she fulfill the mission? She had definitely decided to give Naruto a real chance rather than just writing him off. She had seen how he interacted with the various girls around the house. Even though Amaterasu and Hana weren't there, he had gone out of his way to aid both Hikari and Anko in anything they asked, and even some things they hadn't. And, while she had avoided him for the most part, he was still always civil and kind to her. She had also seen him interact with Tsunade, Shizune, and Jiraiya quite often. While he treated Jiraiya like a perverted older brother, he treated Shizune as a lovable older sister and Tsunade as his almost mother, seeing as she was the only person outside of his girls that could get him to do something without argument if she was serious. That didn't mean that Naruto didn't still annoy Tsunade to no end though. Yujito had actually noticed a stark improvement in Naruto's control when he had trained in the backyard with Tsunade. He could easily float a boulder as big as a small elephant without much trouble for nearly half an hour before he became too impatient to keep it up. She'd put his control at close to Umbu level, although not quite there yet. Tsunade had actually taught him the diagnostic jutsu and he could effectively use it, but he couldn't heal anyone yet. Yujito shook her head free of those thoughts and looked at the time before gawking. She had accidentally stayed up all night. How the hell hadn't she noticed? You were quite busy, kitten. Nibby sang in her mind. Still, I should have noticed. How come I'm not tired? She mentally asked her companion. Since we have resynchronized, it would seem that you have enough energy to go till tonight. Unusual, but helpful, no? Nibby replied. Yujito mentally nodded before hearing a knock at the door. Yujito-san. It's Kushina. May I come in? She asked. Yujito blinked in surprise. Yes, of course. Come on in, she replied as she unlocked the door and retook her seat on the bed. Kushina hesitantly opened the door and looked around before settling her gaze on the blonde-haired female and smiling warmly. She walked in with a tray of food. Hello, Yujito-san, I thought you may be hungry and would bring you some breakfast, she said, still smiling. Yujito opened her mouth to respond when her stomach responded in a deep growl which caused a blush to appear on the feline female's face. Kushina just giggled and silently handed her the food before taking a seat on the bed next to her and eating her own breakfast. Yujito quickly ate her food, stealing curious glances at Kushina all the while. As she finished, however, she sighed. You want to talk to me, don't you? She asked as she set the empty plate aside. Kushina finished her own food and nodded. I do. I would like to help you with this. It's obvious you stayed up all night and I just feel like it may help if you have another point of view, she said. Yujito gave her a wary look, so Kushina just sighed. However, if you don't wish for my input then I will leave, she continued, nearly standing up before Yujito clapped a hand on her wrist. And no, you may be right. Nibby-chan usually helps me, but I don't think she really helped with a view that isn't influenced by my own thoughts, she replied, causing Kushina to smile and put her own hand comfortingly on Yujito's own. Said female took a deep breath and continued, I am sure that I will accept this mission, however I am having trouble complying 100% with the parameters of the mission, she said. Kushina nodded in understanding. So you do want to stay here, but you are still worried about Naruto not measuring up, she asked. Yujito nodded. It's not that he's a bad guy or anything, I am just scared because few people have ever treated me nicely and I've never really been on a true date before, at least not with a man who actually cares for me as a woman, she said sadly. Kushina frowned with slight anger in her eyes. Then why not go on a date with a guy who will treat you like the woman you deserve to be, she asked. Yujito sighed and gave her a wishful look. I don't know any guys who would do that, or treat me that way after knowing I'm a Jinhiriki, she replied. Kushina rolled her eyes in annoyance and huffed before grabbing Yujito's hand and dragging her out of her room, much to her protest. You are going on a date tonight and you can't get out of it, she said forcefully as she entered the dining room that held Naruto and his girls. She quickly set Yujito in front of Naruto, causing her to blush bright red as she figured what was going to happen. She opened her mouth, but Kushina beat her to it by saying, Naruto-kun, you and Yujito-chan are going out tonight, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Get out and get ready, she said, shoving him towards the door. Naruto looked at her like she was crazy before sparing a glance at the blushing Yujito, who looked away but nodded in agreement. Naruto just smiled and promptly disappeared out the front door. The rest of the girls all shared a look before one word was issued forth. Makeover, they yelled as they grabbed Yujito and began to set her up to knock Naruto dead. With Naruto had promptly fled the Namikaze estates when he heard the word makeover, however not before Kushina's shadow clone had caught up to him. She had told him of Yujito's talk with Kushina and Naruto had smirked before saying, well, I guess I'll just have to treat her like the princess she is, as he turned and walked off to set things up for the evening, leaving a smiling Kushina to disappear. His first stop was the Yamanaka flower shop, after which he quickly made a cage bunshin to send the flowers to his lab before making quite a few more and searching for the person/people who knew Yujito best, namely the Kyumo delegation in town. He found them at a nearby Akamiki restaurant and swiftly made his way there. Less than 2 minutes later he entered the restaurant and smiled seeing his targets. He approached them and waved warmly saying, hello, fancy meeting you here, while trying to keep the atmosphere mostly calm. The Kyumo genin all looked at him with slight surprise and distrust in their eyes. Well, in Samui's case it wasn't just slight. However just finished chewing and swallowed, cut the crap. What do ya need? He asked before taking another bite of his ribs. Naruto's cheerful demeanor wavered only slightly before he responded, may I join you? I will even pay for the meal he offered. Killer B and shared a look before nodding. Naruto promptly took a seat beside Killer B and ordered his own rack of ribs. Gave him another look and said, alright, what do ya wanna know about her? He asked, getting shocked looks from the genin. Samui glared at her leader. Why would you give up information on Yujitone so easily? She half asked, half yelled. Naruto ignored her and grew serious. Is there anything specific she likes? Any type of specific candy she loves? Hell, is there any fantasy I could use to make her feel special? She's been avoiding me, so I don't have much info to go on. I really wanna wow her, no, he said, giving a slight smirk at the end. Samui glared at him while the other Kumonin racked their brains for an answer. I know she collects cat dolls, and she likes milk, dark chocolate, and sushi. Unfortunately, I don't know of anything else I can offer. Said, causing Samui to change her glare from Naruto to said leader. Killer B chuckled, 2 likes late night picnics and shiny jewelry, yo. You should take her on a late night strollio, he rapped. The Kumonin ignored it, but Naruto awkwardly nodded. It was still better than Flames of Youth, TM. Karui spoke up next with her head still resting in her hand. She especially likes the color blue, so if you can give her a ring or necklace then she'd probably like that, she said. Samui, in the meantime, was glaring at each of her comrades like they were traitors. I can't believe you all. You're just going to arbitrarily help him get into Yujitone's pants. What kind of friends are you? She asked angrily. Huffed, tiring quickly of his genin's attitude, concerned ones. We all know her life in Kumo sucked. She couldn't find a man that would treat her right, and she has a chance at that here. The fact that the boy took time out to come learn more about her speaks of how much he wishes to make her feel needed. He said, before his gaze turned to Naruto and turned icy, causing Naruto to gulp. However, if you break her heart, I'll break your back and make you watch as I slowly dismember you, he said darkly, causing Naruto to nod his head furiously. Samui was still smoldering, so Naruto decided to speak out. If you think I'm doing this just to sleep with Yujito-chan, you can shove it, he said, causing Samui's eyes to widen. She's a beautiful woman, one that deserves to be treated like a princess, and not a demon. She is scarred from the few encounters she has had with other men, and I want to help her see that not all men are interested in just sex. A Jinhiraki's life is hard, and we have very few people who can understand our suffering or our positions in life. It is obvious that you care more for her than your friends, but perhaps you are being overprotective. Maybe she just needs one good man to make her happy. Naruto suggested. Samui scowled slightly. And you are gonna be that man? She asked somewhat rudely. Naruto sighed in response. I just want to help her open up. If I happen to make her happy on the way, well, I can pat myself on the back for attracting one of the strongest women I have ever met in my life. If I don't, then maybe someone else can. Either way, seeing her happy will bring a smile to my face, cause smiles are contagious, he said with a smirk at the end. Samui blinked in shock and sat silent, with all eyes on her, even if she didn't notice it at the moment. Well, he does seem genuine. He isn't lying, and he seems to care enough to find out about her even if she isn't here. Wait. He said He's a Jinhiraki too. So then he can relate to her, and that's why he helped. I guess I have just one last thing to do. She thought. She lowered her head, letting her bangs hide her face. You promise to really treat her like a princess? She asked slowly, as she raised her gaze to meet his own. Naruto nodded furiously. I promise, and I don't break my promises, he said smiling, staring into her eyes the entire time. Samui blinked and lowered her head again. Just as Karui was about to check on her, she spoke lowly so only Naruto could hear her. Yujitone's always had this one fantasy. She knows that she inherited quite a few traits from Nibi-san, but she likes to think that this one is her own imagination. You know the old proverb about putting a bell on a bad cat, right? She asked, getting a nod from the blonde-haired demigod. Well, she always thought it'd be insanely kinky if a guy she was dating would give her a collar with a bell on it. You know, kinda like you always wanna know where she's at so you can surprise her? Well, that, and she always liked to think of being the bad cat for her boyfriend, she said, blushing. Naruto was silent for a moment before his eyes lit up and he hugged Samui, nearly yelling, "Thank you." Needless to say, Samui was slightly shocked and didn't react when he suddenly put her down and thanked them all before dashing out the door. They all stared at the door for a second before Karui chuckled. "Anyone else gonna spy on their date?" she asked, getting, "Are you stupid?" looks from the rest of them before she deadpanned. "Right, just asking," she said. Yeah, they were all going to be sure that he treated Yujito right, and heaven help him if he hurt her. That night, Namikaze Estates. Naruto smirked as he fingered the seal on his forearm. He had spent the entire afternoon preparing for the night and wanted everything to go perfect. He held a bouquet of flowers that had some jasmine, for grace and elegance, orchids, for delicate beauty, and pink tulips, simply to show he cared. "I looked this up, please don't flame me if it's wrong." He took a deep breath and knocked on the door, only for his brain to shut down after it opened. Yujito was blushing furiously, but some part of her was happily noticing that Naruto couldn't take his eyes off of her. She was wearing a black kimono. The girls had chosen it because it showed off her cleavage, which had a golden Chinese dragon twisting its way around her body from her feet to her chest, where it ended over her heart, holding the kanji for storm. Her obsidian eyes fit perfectly with her kimono, and the dragon was only a shade darker than her hair. Her feet were in normal black kunoichi heels. Naruto, himself, was being looked over by the blushing blonde. She already knew he was ripped, but he didn't wear anything to flatter his body. Rather, Naruto was dressed in a simple male kimono that was a dark blue in color. All across the kimono were small white dots, like rain, and on his lower back, a golden wolf howling at a clouded moon. His front held only the kanji for storm and namikaze over his left and right breasts, respectively. He wore simple black shinobi sandals. Yujito noticed Naruto starting to come back to reality and quickly wiped away the drool that had accumulated on her chin. "Sorry, I must have the wrong address. I could have sworn I died and went to heaven cause I'm seeing angels," Naruto said as he turned to walk back down the driveway, shaking his head at his stupidity. Yujito blushed bright crimson. "You're looking for the Namikaze Estates, right?" she asked, playing along with her date. Naruto stopped and nodded. Yujito smiled. "You're at the right place. Maybe you should just take this angel on a date," she said, trying to sound seductive. "Kitten, that was pretty good," Nibi commented, glad she didn't take that compliment like she normally does, causing Yujito's blush to return. Naruto blinked before a smile spread across his lips and he walked back to Yujito, giving her the bouquet. "Only if the angel wants to grace me with her presence," he replied, offering her his arm. Yujito smirked and a cage bunshin appeared behind her, taking the flowers. She latched onto Naruto's arm and smiled seductively. "I'd say she could use a good date right about now," she commented as they set off down the road, and into the darkening night. Off to the side and up in the house, many eyes were watching and blinked before thinking, "Damn. That was smooth," as they watched the pair walk off. Clearing in Konoha's forest, 8 p.m. Naruto and Yujito had taken their time while walking to where Naruto had set up dinner. Yujito was rather surprised when he had led her through the least populated part of town, then the park, and, finally, out into a large clearing with the moon rising and a waterfall at the other end. She looked around only to notice a small candle that was burning brightly on top of a blanket with a basket food on it. She had conflicting thoughts as to how he knew just how to please her, but decided to hold off on asking them as he led her to the food and offered her one of the pillows that lay on the blanket. Soon, she realized the basket held large amounts of many different kinds of sushi in it along with some cold milk. She quirked an eyebrow at the fact that there was no alcohol and gave him a questioning glance as he sat down. Naruto froze for a moment and gave a nervous smile. "I didn't do something wrong, did I?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, but how come there's no sake?" she countered. It wasn't that she wanted sake, she just knew from experience that many couples enjoyed a small cup of sake while on a date as it could help loosen your inhibitions, or your partner's depending on the preference. Naruto blinked owlishly. "I didn't think it would be appropriate seeing as this is a first date and we really don't know each other well enough to risk getting drunk," Naruto replied. It was Yujito's turn to blink as she realized that was a very polite and responsible answer. "Ah, yes, right. Sorry, I was just curious," she said, blushing a bit in embarrassment. Naruto shook his head as he offered her a glass of milk, which she gladly accepted. "It's no problem, I'm glad you agree with me," he replied. Yujito decided to take a sip of her milk and start eating so she could pass over this rather awkward moment. Soon enough, the two were eating silently as they watched the stars glow and the moon rise into the night. "So, Naruto, what hobbies do you have?" Yujito asked, trying to break the ice a bit. Naruto chewed his food and thought for a moment. Well, I enjoy designing new seals. I do enjoy a good prank every now and again, however that has deteriorated with time and I don't prank the villagers anymore, he answered, before tapping his chin, although, I guess I do like to garden as well, he said before shrugging as he couldn't think of anything else appropriate to say. What about you, he asked. She sighed and tapped her own chin, I guess, collecting cat plus highs, messing with Nibby, and training really are my hobbies, she replied truthfully. Naruto nodded. So what's your affinities, he asked curiously. Fire and lightning. Yours, she replied, looking at him. Wind, lightning, and a slight water, he answered smirking. She pouted slightly as he had more affinities than her and he laughed loudly causing her to pout more. He wiped an imaginary tear from his eye and chuckled, you're really cute when you pout, you know that, he said, causing Yujito to stiffen and blush simultaneously. Naruto noticed her stiffen and his face became riddled with concern. Yujito-chan, are you okay? He asked as he moved the food out of the way so he could sit closer to her. She stiffly nodded but returned to looking at the stars. Naruto mentally cursed and frowned but joined her in her silent vigil. How come I can't take a compliment without seeing it as some ploy to get in my pants, she screamed in her mind. Nibby was mentally watching and sighed before a rather foxy glint appeared in her eyes and Yujito suddenly found herself staring at her first date when she was 15. Author Akuma no Jutsu. Flashback no Jutsu. Yujito was dressed in a stunning knee-length golden dress, high heels, stunning emerald earrings, and a silver bracelet with studded gems, and her date, a chunin by the name of Tokaijin, was dressed in black slacks and a dark blue shirt. He leaned forward over their table in a secluded, and rather expensive, restaurant and smirked, you look beautiful tonight Yujito-chan. You really went all out didn't you, he asked. This particular chunin had been after her for weeks, she had played hard to get, and tried to make sure he was genuine, before accepting his offer. He was right in his assumption that she had put quite a bit into her look to, hopefully, make the date run smoothly. She blushed and nodded in embarrassment at being caught. His smirk widened and he sat back, I'm glad you finally decided to go on a date with me Yujito-chan. You really do shine with those earrings you have on, he commented. She smiled warmly at him and then sunk her head as she continued to eat so she wouldn't have to look at him. She should have kept her eyes on him, because he was staring at her with unrestrained lust. Time skip, end of date. The date had been very good, in Yujito's opinion. He had, almost, constantly complimented her on her clothing or accessories and she had honestly enjoyed all of the positive attention. Tokaijin had even offered to walk her home. She mentally giggled in happiness as she saw her apartment come into view, even though she was rather sad that such a nice date had to end so soon. She glanced at her date, who was holding her hand, and smiled softly as they reached the stairs of her apartment building. She turned to him and let go of his hand. I had a good time tonight Tokaijin, thanks, she said still smiling. Tokaijin smirked, so did I. Maybe this night doesn't have to end he suggested as he took a step closer to her. Yujito's smile faltered slightly as she took a step back. I'm sorry, but I have a mission in the morning and, she didn't get to finish as Tokaijin growled lightly before slamming his lips hungrily onto hers. Yujito's eyes widened and she froze for a second before she rudely pushed him away. He stumbled back a few feet before catching his balance and glaring at her. You bitch. What's you do that for, he asked as he advanced on her again. Yujito glared back at him, although there was fear in her eyes. I said no Tokaijin, she replied. He closed the distance and slammed a hand onto the wall to the right of her head causing her to flinch. I didn't spend all that money on a good dinner just for you to decide you don't wanna pay up, he growled out. Yujito shrank a bit but pushed him away again. I'm not going to pay up as you said it because I didn't agree to sleep with you, she yelled at him. He tried to close the distance again but was stopped as he noticed Killer Bee standing at the top of the stairs. TCH. You're nothing but a cat slut. You should have just submitted to me tonight. By tomorrow, I'll make sure everyone knows you're just another pussycat, he said venomously before stalking off. Yujito watched him go with hate in her eyes before she stormed upstairs and flung herself onto her bed and crying her eyes out. She should have known that he only took her out to get between her legs. Author Tenshi no Jutsu. Release. Yujito's eyes went wide. That's why she equated his compliments to sex. Because that bastard had complimented her all night and all he wanted was sex. Her mind screeched to a halt. Was she really that superficial? She asked herself. She looked over at Naruto, noticing his tense posture, and opened her mouth when Naruto, unknowingly, cut her off. Listen. I don't know why you're so guarded, and I can only hope that you can come to trust me with time, he said as his hand went to the seal on his forearm. I want to give you this, as a sign of our friendship, and a sign of my promise to protect you, he said as he unsealed a beautiful golden necklace that had a sapphire cut into the shape of a roaring flame hanging from the front. He gently turned to her and held it out for her to try on. Yujito was speechless and silently grabbed her hair and held it back so Naruto could snap it on. He gingerly did so, treating her and the necklace like they were made of glass. When he finally finished, he let it hand and Yujito let her hair down. Naruto smirked. It looks as lovely on you as I had hoped, he said softly. Yujito blushed and looked away, trying to think of some way to repay him and help her get over her whole first date was a shitty experience complex. Kiss him. Nibi shouted in her mind. Yujito nearly stumbled before closing her eyes and gathering her courage, trusting in the advice of her longtime friend. She turned to Naruto, who was still staring at her, and grabbed his face before softly connecting their lips. While she had felt violated by Tokaijin's kiss, when she felt her lips connect to Naruto, she could have sworn that there was a jolt of electricity that traveled through her body from that touch. His lips were soft and smooth, warm and pink. He had eagerly returned the kiss but without stepping over his bounds. She was aware of him wrapping his arms around her body and pulling them closer, but she didn't care. This was the best she had felt in a long, long time. Naruto, on the other hand, was plainly shocked by Yujito's action and had frozen for only a second before he had returned the affection she was showing him. The cool night air was still between them, so he had opted to pull her closer to himself. He was not disappointed when he started to move his lips slightly to keep the contact engaging, and she had returned those movements quite readily. They kept in their rather chaste kiss for nearly 3 minutes before breaking for air, Yujito's arms around his neck and Naruto's around her midriff. Wow! Naruto said breathlessly. Yujito chuckled and nodded in agreement. He looked at her before looking at the sky and noticing it was nearing midnight. As much as I hate to say this, I think we'd best head home, he said. She wordlessly agreed with him again and they stood up with Naruto leaving a few shadow clones to clean up. Namikaze Estates, midnight. Naruto and Yujito had made it home with plenty of night to spare and headed towards the stairs when Yujito stopped in front of Naruto. Naruto looked at her with concern, but unbeknownst to him, she was licking her lips in preparation of what she was going to do, again. Naruto opened his mouth only to find it occupied by Yujito's very active tongue. Naruto moaned at the sensation and began to tongue wrestle as he felt her hands massage his scalp. He quickly grabbed her waist and pulled them closer as he tricked her tongue and slipped his own into her wet cavern and began to explore. They played tonsil hockey for a good 5 minutes before breaking breathlessly and Yujito smirking sexily. Good night Naruto-kun, I expect more dates in the future, she said softly before disappearing up the stairs. Naruto stared at where she was for a moment before his tongue slid over his lips and he smirked in pleasure as he headed up to bed. Tonight had been a good night. In Yujito's room, she stood panting behind the door she had nearly slammed. Her heart was racing and she couldn't get the wonderful feeling of Naruto's body pressed against her own out of her mind. Nibi mentally chuckled, seems like somebody had a good time, but you should pay more attention to your surroundings kitten, she commented before falling asleep. Yujito blushed at the first part but then looked around curiously as she took in her room. Everything appeared to be in place until it came to her bed. There sitting on her pillow, was a scroll. Yujito looked at it warily and approached looking for traps. After spending a good 5 minutes checking it, she opened it to see a small letter addressed to her and a storage seal below it. Dear Nikoheim. Hi. I don't really know how to say this, so I think I'll be blunt. I'm sure you were wondering how I knew all about you and your little quirks. Well, I sorta asked your friends from Kumo to give me a hand and they did. Now, before you get mad at them, I want you to know that I did pay for their lunch and I'm sure they just wanted you to be happy, same as me. Chibi Naruto smiling brightly causing Yujito to chuckle in amusement, so they gave me the information I asked for. I'm pretty sure you figured out what they told me but I have one last surprise for the night. You see, your adoptive sister, Samui, took some real convincing to part with this information and I just found it too juicy to ignore. I know I already gave you the necklace, but in the seal is something I want you to have. Take it, with my best wishes, and be that bad cat for your boyfriend/lover/husband, whoever is lucky enough to win your heart. And, maybe if you want to, I'll be blessed enough to have you be my bad cat one day. Much love. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Yujito was blushing when he commented on the bad cat fantasy but was supremely touched at the ending sentence. Her eyes wandered to the seal and she activated it. She soon found herself holding a beautiful cotton collar that had a two-part emblem hanging from the front. The first was a magnificent sapphire carving of the Nibi, and, hanging from that, was a pretty silver bell that dinged softly as she picked it up. She smiled softly at it as she walked over to her dresser and looked in the mirror before snapping it in place. It fit perfectly, with the bell falling slightly into her cleavage. She smiled lovingly at the gift and slowly took the collar off before placing it gently on her dresser. I'm not your bad cat yet, Naruto Uzumaki, but if you keep this up, I'm sure I'll be that and so much more, she thought warmly as she prepared herself for bed. This had definitely been a good night. Otagakur, same time. Orochimaru chuckled evilly as he extended his neck to mark the last of his sound for the only girl, Tewa. He bit her neck, causing her to scream in pain and clutch at it even as he smiled deviously at his own work. His smile disappeared however as he watched the mark never appear. This was wrong. Even if she died from it, she would still have the mark. How could she not have the mark, he thought. Suddenly he was racked with pain, and the god turned human heard Suzanu's voice. You cannot mark without his approval, it stated ominously, as it flared a picture of Naruto in his demigod form, before the pain and the voice disappeared. Kabuto stepped up to his master. Is everything alright, master? He asked. Orochimaru scowled. No. We have a new objective right now. We are looking for a man with golden hair and blue eyes, he may even have wolf features, also golden. Anyone who can bring me this person alive will have power beyond imagining, he yelled. Kabuto's eyes widened and he bowed before rushing off. His lords will be done. Next day, Kyumo delegation, brunch. Yujito smiled softly as she took a seat with her old comrades. She didn't need Naruto to be here for this. This choice was hers and hers alone. All eyes were on her and she nodded. I have made my decision, she said as her eyes connected with A.E.S. I accept Raikage-sama, she said confidently. Naruto groaned as he stepped down the stairs of his home to the living area, where his girls now sat eating breakfast. He was never a morning person, and the girls all chuckled seeing him walking around like the living dead. That is, until he sniffed the air and the light came to his eyes as his tail started wagging behind him. In a comical moment, he looked like a little lost puppy as his eyes went wide and he said, Ramen, while cocking his head to the side with a curious expression. Needless to say, the girls went crazy and yelled, Kawaii-yainith, before grabbing him and stroking some type of fur, you know, the ears, tail, head, that sorta thing. However, Kushina just chuckled as she made her famous Uzumaki ramen. Naruto purred loudly as his girls continued to shower him with affection, hell even Yujito was rubbing her cheek against his tail. Kushina shook her head and banged the large pot of ramen catching their attention. Everyone take a seat or no ramen for you, she said, causing the girls to all go flying as Naruto appeared with chopsticks in hand and the puppy dog pout no jutsu on full blast. The girls all dusted themselves off and grumbled about being ignored for ramen but that dissipated as they saw Naruto giving Kushina a pout. So, they went back to the must grab cute animal and smother to death mode, but settled for just staring at him when Kushina sent them a slight glare and said, no more glomping Naruto-kun, he needs to eat breakfast before our training, she said, causing everyone to perk up and Naruto look at her in confusion. Training? What are you talking about? He asked as she served him his first bowl and he went to town. She sighed as she served each of the other girls before returning to Naruto for his second bowl. I'm going to teach you about the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style. You're already a seal's master and they were never my particular interest so I doubt I can teach you anything there. So, I want you to learn something of your heritage and the Kenjutsu style is the only thing I can think of, she replied. Naruto pondered it as he devoured his third bowl of ramen before nodding, sounds good actually. My only weakness is genjutsu but learning a sword style for attack may be beneficial seeing as my taijutsu is rather lacking in that area. So, is the Uzumaki style an offensive or a defensive style? He asked. Kushina brightened as she realized she had exactly what he needed. Actually, the style I will be teaching you was passed from clan head to clan head. It's the pinnacle of offensive sword styles called the Hiten Mitsurugai Ryu. Flying Heaven Honorable Sword Style, it's a style that is supposed to be used to protect but is supremely destructive. It's also known as the ultrasonic sword style, as it revolves around ungodly speed, one of only reasons I was ever able to fight your father on equal footing when he used Hiration, she explained. Everyone was speechless, even Amaterasu and Kyuubi knew better than to fight a master of the Huten Mitsurugi Ryu in their human forms. Naruto suddenly grinned, and his girls would later swear that it must have split his face as he grabbed her hand and started running for the door. That sounds awesome. Let's go, he yelled as he dragged her out the door. The girls all looked at one another before shrugging and turning to Yujito. Well, Yujito-chan, glad to see you enjoyed yourself the other night. Anko said, advancing on the trapped feline female. You never did tell us what happened on that little date of yours, she said, her eyes shining with mischief. Kitten, answer their questions and hope you live to tell the tale again. Nibi remarked as Yujito gulped and began to tell her side of the date to Naruto's most precious people. Even as she did so, however, bad thoughts were entering the minds of Naruto's most devout lovers. Both Anko and Hikari noticed Kushina's actions and were attributing them to be closer to a mother's than that of a lover's, which made them both frown mentally. There was no way they were letting Kushina use a ruse of wanting to be their Naruto-kun's lover only to assert herself as his mother. Not while they were around. Yes, Kushina would warrant some close observation. Training Ground 44, same time. Naruto had dragged Kushina out to his lab, seeing as he didn't want to destroy his home training ground. Using it for friendly spars and elemental or chakra training was one thing, but there was no way he would risk it with the style that Kushina described. He turned to his fiery phoenix and smiled. So, where do we begin? He asked. Kushina glared at him slightly and smoothed out her battle kimono before pulling out a seal. She quickly unsealed a bukin and handed it to him. 400 downward swings, then 400 upward swings, then 400 left to right swings, and then 400 right to left swings. At least 200 kage bunshin. You will show me your full speed and then do these exercises. Begin, she stated. Naruto's eye twitched, but he sighed and nodded. He muttered a soft kai as he released all his resistance seal, now at level 9, and disappeared from Kushina's view. It was only through years of honed reflexes, and sparring with Minato, that Kushina was able to block Naruto's punch. They engaged in a quick bout of taijutsu, Kushina being slightly slower than Naruto but her experience shining through. They separated, both breathing only slightly heavier than when they began, and Kushina smiled. Good, you have more than enough speed to use this style. Begin, she said as she took a step back. Naruto huffed but made 500 clones, who all nodded and spread out before beginning their exercises. Kushina walked up to one clone and noticed that its downward swings were near perfect, so she fixed it and let it swing another 10 times before bopping it on the head, dispelling it and letting the others know how to do it correctly. This continued for 3 hours as Naruto, and his clones, committed the basic swings for any swordsman. Halfway through their training, however, Kushina approached Naruto. She moved in close and helped with his side-to-side swings as she whispered in his ear, "We have a visitor." Naruto extended his senses and sighed, realizing who it was. Hinata Hyuga. She has an obsessive crush on me but is too shy to speak up. Unfortunately, I don't want to hurt her feelings, but I also can't accept her as a lover because she's just too young for me. Even as a 12-year-old, I still never considered her to be mature enough for a real relationship. On top of that, she is far too shy, and I don't think I would be doing her justice by letting her use me as a crutch for her insecurities. Naruto replied as he continued his strikes. Kushina nodded. I understand. How about finding someone else who likes her and having them try to have her forget about you? She asked, still helping with his swings. Naruto's eyes lit up. Excellent idea, Kushina-chan. I know just the person too, he said, smirking. Yes, he knew the perfect person for Hinata Hyuga, and he happened to be Naruto's best friend. Demon Author Release. Flashback no Jutsu. 2 months ago. Team 10 was relaxing at a small sushi restaurant when they noticed Team 8, Hinata, Sakura, and Shikamaru, sit down a few tables away. Neither of the teams were accompanied by their senseis, oddly enough. The members of Team 10 simply nodded to the new arrivals before returning to their meal. However, Naruto noticed Shino's head lingering longer on a blue-haired girl than the others. He mentally filed it away for future reference and returned to his team's discussion. It was a simple talk of the pros and cons of attending the Chunin exams in 3 months. Suddenly, the door to the small eatery was loudly opened and a smaller version of Hinata, minus the obvious alluring feminine attributes, walked in. The mini-not Hinata sneered as soon as she noticed her. She promptly walked in, followed by 2 branch member bodyguards, and strode right up to Hinata's table. Hinata, for her part, was trying to hide in her jacket and many people were watching with curiosity in their eyes. Well, I see my sister is eating here as well. Shouldn't you be outstock? Oops, I mean watching your precious secret crush, she asked with scorn in her eyes. Sakura bristled. Shikamaru seemed to have a slight fire in his eyes, but Hinata just hung her head and nearly hyperventilated before responding. Hanabine-san, why shouldn't he be so loud? Why you could anger the other customers, she said softly, poking her fingers together. Hanabi sneered, so weak. You stutter even in public. I can't believe we are even related. I bet even your precious crush is nothing more than a weak. She never got to finish as Shino had reappeared in front of the newly identified Hanabi Hyuga. He pushed his glasses up and glared through them at the stuck-up child. Your actions are illogical, even more so when dealing with your own kin. Cease your senseless degradation and allow us all to return to our lunch in former comfort which you have disrupted, as your sister has suggested. Shino replied with only a hint of anger in his voice. Ino, Sakura, and even Shikamaru stared in shock at the Abarame boy, not only from his speed, but his protective nature as well. Naruto, however, was smirking. Does Shino have a crush on little Hinata, he thought. Hinata, for her part, stared at the broad back of the bug user in shock. She had expected maybe Sakura, or hopefully Naruto, to protect her, but not the stoic Abarame. Hanabi's sneer seemed to grow, her 2 bodyguards shifting around uncomfortably as Naruto aided his friend with a slight amount of ki at the 2. Or what, bug freak? I can do as I wish. My sister is far too weak to become clan head and will soon be ousted as the clan heir. When that happens, I'll be happy to make her my personal servant from the branch family. The only other thing she could be used for is a political marriage, but who would want such a weak and unattractive wimp, she said smirking in triumph. Shino frowned, as did just about everyone else in the restaurant. Just because your body cannot compare to Hinata's allure, does not mean you should belittle her for it. As to your question, Hinata needs simply to believe in herself, and she could be far more than you give her credit to be, he stated simply, causing Hanabi to turn red in embarrassment and rage. She sputtered for a second before turning and leaving the establishment in a huff. Everything was quiet for a moment before Naruto whistled in appreciation. That was smooth, Shino. I gotta get you to help me out if I ever get in trouble, he remarked smirking. The collective thoughts running through everyone else's mind was, did he just hit on Hinata, before shaking their heads as Shino silently returned to his seat, blushing despite himself. Hinata herself was trying to hide from him. Unbeknownst to everyone, even herself, she would subconsciously pay attention to the bug user for the next several months, noting things about him that she would never have noticed otherwise. Tenshi author release. Kai no Jutsu. Yes, Naruto knew who to use to make Hinata happy. Unfortunately, the plan forming in his mind would require him to hurt the poor girl first. But, hopefully, his teammate would be there to help her through, and that is what he was counting on. Team 10 training, later that week. Naruto arrived and chuckled nervously. He was late by about 3 minutes due to Kushina forcing him to work on his kenjutsu swings. Practice makes perfect was her view on the subject, well that and you can't learn a sword style without proper form. He yelled out a gomen to his teammates and sensei, who just shook their heads and smirked. Yamato had really been training Shino and Ino rather well. When Naruto joined them, they usually worked on chakra control and elemental jutsus. When Yamato stated that they would do physical or one-on-one workouts, however, Naruto usually stayed home, seeing as he was practically light years ahead of his teammates. Not that they minded, and Yamato accepted it as well. Ino was easily low to mid-chunin in pretty much everything but ninjutsu, which was more high chunin, seeing as Naruto and Yamato had beefed up her jutsus. Her elemental manipulation was slow, but she was far enough along to make her water jutsu more effective. Her taijutsu had taken leaps and bounds, and she could hold her ground against Shino for a good hour before she was too tired to fight functionally anymore. Shino, himself, was practically a taijutsu expert, along with his clan jutsu of course. He had only 4 earth jutsu under his belt, and his own elemental training was slightly better than Ino's. Shino could fight against Yamato for an hour before his Kikaicha made his chakra too low to continue. Speaking of his Kikaicha, the Yuki-eating ones that Naruto had altered for Shino had also developed a paralytic poison they could use against enemies. Yamato had been no slouch himself, training himself to be better than the mid-level Umbu he had once been. Naruto had given him a resistance seal and he was happily sitting at level 6. His taijutsu hadn't needed work, and his ninjutsu was his strength, so he had worked on expanding into Iryo Jutsu. Healing techniques. With Tsunade back, it hadn't been hard for the ex-Umbu to receive some medical training and allow him to heal most wounds, except truly life-threatening ones. Naruto was obviously much faster than before, and Yamato placed him at high Umbu and maybe even Sunin level. His ninjutsu were stronger than Yamato's, although that was mainly due to Naruto having nearly 2 tails of chakra by himself. His elemental manipulation was damn near perfect for lightning and wind, while he was only at the same level as Ino for his water. However, this had allowed him to start mixing his elements and using the Ranton, storm release, that Susanoo had granted him. Simply put, this team was more than ready for the Chunin exams. Today, they were working on teamwork, which usually entailed Naruto or Yamato being the opponent against the team. However, Naruto had a different idea in mind. Yamato-sensei? Naruto asked. Yamato focused his gaze on his male blonde student and said, "Yes, Naruto." Naruto smirked. "Is there any way we could test ourselves against the other genin before we go into the exams?" he asked innocently. Yamato thought about it for a moment before nodding. "Actually, that's a good idea. It'll give everyone a chance to see how strong the other genin have gotten in the past few months." "I'll set up a small spar with the other genin soon," he replied. Naruto smiled widely. "Thanks, sensei," he said. Phase 1 complete. I hope this works, cause if not, Hinata is gonna hate me, and so is her sensei. Naruto thought. 2 weeks later, joint training of teams 7,8,10, 10 a.m. All 3 rookie teams had assembled and been told that there were 2 weeks before the exams. This was to be a test of their skills, although Naruto had suggested it for a far different purpose. Kakashi, for his part, was worried about his team's ability to work together. While Chuji and Kiba could work together without much problem, Sasuke was a loner and condescending to his teammates. So much so, that Kiba had nearly attacked him on different occasions. Originally, Kakashi was being pressured into training Sasuke almost exclusively, but when the council had lost 90% of its power, and with Tsunade coming into office, he had been able to inspire some teamwork in his team, although it was always forced because of Sasuke's spoiled attitude. He hadn't taught them anything but tree climbing, although Kiba and Chuji had their clans training them, so that was acceptable, especially after Kakashi informed their parents of just why he couldn't teach them any other abilities. Sasuke was definitely not mature, nor stable, enough to handle more power without letting it go to his head and getting him killed. Kurane, however, had thoroughly trained her team. Sakura had proven quite adept at not only Genjutsu, but Iryo Jutsu as well. She had recently been studying under Shizune in the hospital. Unfortunately, her taijutsu and ninjutsu were rather lacking, but Kurane hoped that the Chunin exams would make Sakura snap out of her daydreams about Sasuke and put more effort into being a true kunoichi. Hinata, however, hadn't improved all that much. With all the restrictions enforced on her by the clan, her only shining ability was her Byakugan and her taijutsu, which could actually fight a low jounin surprisingly, although this had only improved in the last 2 months. Shikamaru, well, everything was too troublesome for him, but Kurane had been able to get him to work a bit, and he now had a solid chakra pool and ample control to use it. To be brutally honest, even though all 3 teams were attending the exams, only 4 of the 9 were truly applicable for Chunin advancement. Naruto arrived before Team 7 and noticed Hinata glance from Shino, who was watching a ladybug, to him before looking down and poking her fingers together. He sighed and walked over to Shino, who was far enough away that they could talk without being overheard. "Hey Shino. How's it going?" Naruto asked his best friend as he squatted next to him. Shino did not acknowledge his presence aside from the slight shift to the right to make room for Naruto. "Quite fine, Naruto. And yourself?" he replied monotonously. Naruto chuckled. "Just fine," he replied, smiling softly. The two crouched in silence for a moment before Naruto grew serious. "Shino. How do you feel about Hinata?" he asked in a bored tone. Shino stiffened slightly and looked at Naruto, his eyes piercing through his goggles. "As much you are my friend, Naruto, it does not matter how I feel. She sees you and only you," he replied stiffly. Naruto sighed. "That's the thing. I don't like her," he said, holding his hands up in a defensive gesture when he heard Shino's bugs begin to vibrate, signifying his annoyance. "Not that she isn't a good person, but I just don't see her as wife material for me. I plan on telling her as such today and was hoping that there was a guy who would like to show her that she is something special, he countered as he looked up to the sky. Shino was silent for a moment before noticing the arrival of Team 7. He stood and began to walk away. Just before he reached the others' hearing range, he stopped before turning around and staring holes into Naruto's head. After you speak with her, someone should give that caterpillar the confidence to evolve into the beautiful butterfly it can be, he stated before heading to join the others. Naruto's smile threatened to split his face. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Shino, he said softly as he stood up and joined his team. Soon enough, the teams were all standing in front of their senseis. The other genin had seen Naruto at various times and had been given the story of his growth from his bloodline, which many believed, coming from bloodline clans themselves. So they did not overreact to his appearance, although Kiba was still a bit annoyed at him for being in a relationship with his sister. Yamato stepped forward. All right, since this is the first time we have met since your time in the academy, we have decided to allow volunteers to fight one another. If any of the senseis order you to stop or not to use a technique, the fight is over. Understood, he asked, using his scary face jutsu to its ultimate use. The genin all nodded, most cowed by the scary Exumbu. Good. Would anyone like to go first, he asked, which got a raised hand from Kiba, who smirked as Yamato nodded and stepped back, allowing him into the small circle the senseis had drawn so the genin would know where to start. Anyone else? Yamato asked, looking over the group. Naruto sighed as he noticed Kiba's glare at him and raised his hand. Yamato smiled and waved him forward as everyone else took steps away from the small arena. You fight till one is incapacitated or I stop you, understood? He received 2 nods and raised his hand. Hajime, he yelled, bringing his hand down. Kiba raised a finger and pointed at Naruto. I'm gonna get you, dobe. I don't care what kind of bloodline or abilities you were hiding. You are not worthy of my sister, he growled as he fed Akamaru a pill, and the small puppy turned red before turning into another Kiba as the original yelled, Jujin Bunshin, and smirking at Naruto, who looked bored. Is that all? Hana-chan can choose who she wants to date, runt. She's strong enough to chase off those she doesn't consider worthy. Naruto stated, emphasizing Hana's pet name for her little brother. Kiba growled, don't call me a runt and I don't care what you say. Hana can only marry someone who I approve of, he yelled as he got ready to charge. Naruto scoffed, please, don't delude yourself, Kiba. Hana will marry whomever she wants, I'm just lucky enough to be on the other end of that agreement, he said honestly, before he glared at Kiba. However, you should learn to keep your mouth shut. Hana-chan told me you'd be possessive, but this is stupid. I guess I'll just have to kick your ass, he said as he dropped into his own taijutsu stance. Kiba growled again and launched himself forward, with Akamaru at his side, and started to attack Naruto fiercely. Now, while the Inyazukas are known for tracking, they are also just about the second or third best taijutsu clan in the village, depending if you count the thieving Uchiha or not. Obviously, the Hyuga were first, but that's beside the point. Kiba was a very brash individual and his taijutsu was the best of the clan kids his age, sans Hinata, and probably Sasuke. So when Naruto skillfully evaded all of his and Akamaru's attacks like it was child's play, Kiba grew very angry and very surprised. Hold still so I can pummel you into submission, dobe. Kiba grunted out as he threw another punch at Naruto. Naruto smirked and redirected the attack before lashing out with his own punch that sent Kiba flying back. Sure, Kiba, I'll stand still, he replied, gaining surprised looks from the rest of the shinobi present. I'll even let you get a hit in. If I go down, I'll stop dating your sister, he said. Kiba smirked and looked to Akamaru, who nodded and barked in his Bunshin form. You're on, dobe. I'll take you down in one shot. Ready, Akamaru? He asked his partner, who barked in agreement. Now Akamaru was not stupid, he knew Naruto was going to win. After all, the Himuru triplets had thoroughly warned him of Naruto's battle prowess. However, that wouldn't stop Akamaru from helping his master test Naruto's worth. Kiba and Akamaru started running forward as Naruto relaxed and looked at them with a bored expression. They twisted together into 2 whirlwinds and Kiba yelled, Gatsuaga! Fang over fang! Everyone watched in anticipation as Naruto stood directly in their path, seemingly unnerved by the approaching cyclones. Just before they hit, however, the Jounins and his teammates noticed a smirk and a soft foolish before a cloud of dust enveloped the 3. When it cleared, the genin were witnesses to a surprising sight. Akamaru lay exhausted staring at Kiba, who was being held by the neck by Naruto in his Titan form. He smirked, and with his sharpened teeth in this form, he looked downright nasty. I said one hit, Kiba. Akamaru hit me first, but that barely grazed me. I will give you credit, you are the first to wound me in this form. You lose, Kiba. Naruto said, accentuating his words with a sharp squeeze of Kiba's neck. Kiba growled softly in defiance, but Naruto just squeezed again until he whimpered, signifying defeat. Yamato smirked, winner. Naruto Uzumaki, he said, causing Naruto to nod and drop Kiba before reverting back to his regular form. Luckily he had learned how to maintain his henge of his regular form between shifts. He walked back to the group, discreetly slipping a piece of paper into Hinata's pocket as he returned to his team. Was it necessary to be so rough, Naruto? Shino asked. Naruto shrugged and Shino sighed before turning back to the matches. Most of the following matches were boring. Shikamaru refused to fight, saying everything was too troublesome. Chuji fought Shino, and was easily defeated by the Bug Boy's logic and tactical planning. Ino and Sakura had a match, but Sakura lost soundly as Ino easily used her new jutsus to full use and blasted her ex-best friend into the lake. Hinata didn't want to fight, and the senseis, after being chewed out by Kurane, agreed to let her be. However, the true problem was the stuck-up emo boy, aka Sasuke. He stepped into the ring and glared at Naruto. Fight me, he demanded. Naruto glared back, no, I won't fight you to satisfy some strange urge on your part. And if you wanted a spar, you have to be nice about asking, not just demanding it, he replied simply. Sasuke growled and turned to Kakashi, make him fight me, he ordered. Kakashi sighed and opened his mouth, but was cut off by Naruto. You just ordered your commanding officer to order me. That could be construed as insubordination, Uchiha. Naruto stated. Sasuke nearly growled again until he turned his glare back to Naruto before smirking. Fine, if you don't wanna fight, then maybe I can go offer those whores of yours to be with a real man, he said cockily. The entire clearing froze as Naruto heard those words. Kakashi looked at Sasuke with no hidden contempt. Kurane was trying to turn him into ash with a glare alone, and Yamato was ready to turn the kid into mulch. Sakura was crestfallen at her crush's words but silently noticed how cruel he was to Naruto. Shikamaru, Chuji, and Shino were all tensing for a fight. Kiba was ready to rip Sasuke's head off, seeing as one of Naruto's girlfriends was his sister. Hinata was on the verge of a breakdown until she shifted slightly and realized there was a paper in her pocket. Naruto's eyes became glaciers as he stared emotionlessly at Sasuke. Would you care to repeat that, dead meat? He asked monotonously. Sasuke smirked, thinking he had what he wanted. I said, maybe I should show those whores of yours what a real man can do, he replied, still smirking. Kakashi actually face-palmed and turned to Naruto. He's all yours. Just don't kill him, I'm sure the Hokage will have something better in mind, he said. Everyone looked at him funkily, excluding Naruto's team, as they tried to decipher what he meant. Meanwhile, Hinata had opened the small note only to notice that it said to meet a certain someone in the clearing about 500 meters south of here, 15 minutes after practice, signed by Naruto. She nearly melted but kept her composure and turned back to the growing shitstorm. Naruto smirked fearfully. That can be arranged, he said, his voice laden with power. Sasuke opened his mouth to boast before he found himself crashing through 3 trees. Everyone gawked as Naruto's smirk widened. I've been waiting for a chance to do that, he said as he took off after Sasuke. He quickly caught up to the Uchiha, who had just stood up and growled at him. Sasuke ran through seals as fast as he could and said, Katon, Gokyaku no Jutsu. Fire release, Grand Fireball technique, as he expelled a pretty good-sized fireball at Naruto. Naruto frowned, but then smirked as he noticed a small nearby stream. Sujin Hiki no Jutsu. Water release, water wall technique, he yelled as a wall of air surrounded him and nullified the fireball like it was nothing. Sasuke growled at the elemental weakness and cursed Kakashi for not teaching him other jutsu to counter its effects. Naruto stepped forward and growled low in his throat. You ever, and I mean ever, insult my mates or threaten them again and I will rip you limb from fucking limb, Uchiha. Naruto stated as his anger triggered his celestial voice. His celestial voice, despite what you may think, was not heavenly in any way. It held a deep undertone of pure unadulterated power and authority that few, if any, could ignore, and Sasuke was not one of those few. Sasuke shivered in his sandals until the world went black. Naruto had knocked the idiot out lest he end up killing the precious last Uchiha. He sighed as he felt his anger subside. It was good to know he could still control himself. He picked up the Emo King and took him back to the Genin group, where Kakashi sighed and took him to the hospital, to check for broken bones from the knock through 3 trees. Yamato clapped his hands together. All right, since everyone who wanted to fight, fought. We will now break and allow you all to think about whether or not you still wish to enter the exams. Please remember that the Genin here may or may not be an accurate representation of what you may face from other countries. I wish you all good luck and the best of wishes, he said, smiling before he disappeared. Shikamaru quickly left, saying his mom would get too troublesome if he wasn't home for lunch. Sakura asked Ino to get some lunch and catch up, subtly hinting that she wanted to rant about Sasuke, which made the two friends rush off together. Choji quickly ran for his family's nearest restaurant and Kurane just smiled softly at Hinata before saying she had an errand to run and setting off herself. Shino just blended into the trees and Naruto started to jump towards the meeting point. He mentally went over what he wanted to say and sighed as he knew this would end in a way he hated, with Hinata and tears. But Shino could turn those tears into joy and everything would be alright, hopefully. He landed in the clearing with 5 minutes to spare and sat down, spreading his senses out. Not even a minute later, he felt Shino arrive and watch silently. He sighed and waited another 3 minutes before detecting not only Hinata, but Kurane as well, although he was sure that Kurane was being stealthy as Hinata didn't seem to be paying attention to her. Soon enough a flustered Hinata landed in the clearing and poked her fingers together. Hello and Naruto K-kun, she said nervously. Naruto sighed. Hinata, I know you've been watching me train. Don't you have your own training to worry about? He asked with some concern in his voice. He may not like her as a potential wife, but that didn't mean he wouldn't want her as a friend. Hinata blushed crimson but didn't faint. I just wanted to see if you were okay, she said softly. Naruto stood, and kept his senses trained on the 3 people around him, although he was more worried about Kurane's reaction to what he was about to do. Hinata, he said sternly, causing her to look at him. Her eyes widened in surprise as she found him staring at her with an expression that she never thought she'd see from him, disappointment. I know you have a crush on me. Don't interrupt, he said swiftly as she opened her mouth. She slowly closed it and her eyes started to water as he assumed what he was going to say. Unfortunately, I can't be what you want me to be. I am a confident person, but I don't want you to rely on me for everything. I like you, as a friend, but nothing more, he said sadly. Kurane, in the bushes, was frowning. She had thought he would eventually warm up to the young Hyuga heiress, but it seems she was wrong. She noticed Hinata droop her head and a few teardrops fell to the floor. Her heart went out to her younger sister but she kept her distance as she saw Naruto glance in her direction. Hinata cried softly and dropped to her knees before clutching the ground in her hands. So there's no chance, she asked, barely able to speak those words. Naruto sighed in sadness. I'm sorry, but no, he replied. She started to cry heavily then, but through her sobs, you could hear her talking. Myfatherwa was right. I'm just a weakling. A nobody. I can't even get the man I want. I'm just too weak, she said in frustration as her sobs died down and anger overtook her. I'm nothing more than a speck of dirt under his shoe. I'll never be a good kunoichi, or a good heir. They were all right, she yelled, before her voice turned soft. I'm nothing more than a bug in their eyes, she whispered, but everyone heard it. She looked up only to find Naruto gone and she nearly started crying again when another voice sounded through the clearing. And, what, may I ask, is wrong with bugs? Shino asked as he landed in front of Hinata. She frowned, her shy nature having been nearly destroyed by Naruto's words. Bugs can never be strong enough to fight off the humans who crush them, she replied with a slight coldness in her words. Shino arched an eyebrow, and yet, Kikaicho can take out a great many humans who are bigger than they are, he replied. Hinata opened her mouth, but Shino continued, you say you are worthless to them. You believe you are nothing to Naruto, is that right? He asked, getting a shocked nod from the Hyuga heiress. You are wrong. Naruto wishes to be your friend, as he is mine. He sees what I see, but he knows that you cannot become what you can be if he accepts you, he said as he advanced to kneel in front of her. Hinata was shocked and one tear fell from her eye. And what do you see? She asked softly. Shino slowly removed his goggles, showing his brown eyes to Hinata. I see, a caterpillar who has begun to form her chrysalis. She knows she needs to be stronger and therefore seeks to evolve. All she needs is a little help to become the beautiful butterfly that two men can see, but only one wishes to have for his own, he said softly, his voice holding emotions that his clan was so famous for ignoring. Hinata's eyes widened as Shino leaned forward and captured her lips in a soft kiss, surprising her and Kurane, although the set of blue eyes watching were filled with glee. Hinata was stiff for only a moment before relaxing into the kiss, although she didn't truly return it. When they broke, they stared at one another for a moment before Hinata's face turned blood red. Shino-kun. Warn me before you do that again. And she trailed off as she looked to the side. Shino gave her an inquisitive look before becoming shocked as she kissed him on the cheek. You need to get to know a girl before you can just kiss her like that, she said softly. Shino blushed and cleared his throat before standing, causing Hinata to look at him confused. He put his goggles on and smiled at her. Well, then, would you do me the honor of getting to know you better? And the additional one of helping you become the butterfly you can be, he asked. Hinata blushed again but took his hand. I think I can, Shino-kun. But no more surprise kisses until I say so, she said as the two began to walk out of the clearing. Kurane stared shocked until a warm smile came across her lips. You know, that worked out even better than I'd hoped. And is Shino smooth? Are all Abarame like that? Naruto asked from his treetop position. Kurane glanced at him, slightly annoyed, but the smile never left her lips. You set all this up, didn't you? She asked. Naruto chuckled. Maybe, maybe not. I'm just glad they're both happy, he said smiling as he watched the new couple walk away. It stirred something in him and he suddenly knew what he wanted to do soon. Kurane smiled at him. I may not like you for denying Hinata like that, but I won't blame you. She may be better off this way. She said softly. Naruto nodded, smiling. Yeah, I hope so. Anyways, I'ma head home. Later, Kurane-chan, say hi to Asuma for me, he yelled as he disappeared, leaving a flustered Kurane in his wake. Namikaze Estates, that evening. Naruto had spent most of the day in his lab as he practiced after the spars that morning, and the subsequent interaction with Hinata and Shino. Naruto arrived home and was greeted by all the girls as they were just sitting down to eat. Luckily, it wasn't ramen tonight but tacos. Yes, tacos, they have that in Japan. Well, in my story they do, so get used to it. Besides, it doesn't really matter what they're eating. Naruto bit into another tacos and finished chewing before looking across the table and smiling warmly at Amaterasu. Say, Ami-chan, what do ya say you and me go out on a date, this Friday, he asked. Amaterasu nearly choked on her own food before swallowing and smiling brightly. I'd love to, Naruto-kun. Are we gonna go back to the animal kingdom, she asked, as the other girls started listening in intently. Naruto chewed his food as he thought about it before shaking his head. I rather enjoyed my date with Yujito-chan. I think I'd like another midnight picnic, he said with a questioning lilt at the end. Amaterasu smiled softly. Sounds good actually. Friday, pick me up at 7, she asked, getting a nod. She smiled brightly at him as she thought of several ways to knock him dead. Naruto soon bid the girls good night and went to bed, with most of the girls following. However, 3 women convened in a certain feral woman's room. They all smiled at each other and Hana smirked ferally. Operation Okamai no Sekasu 1 has begun, she said softly as the girls all giggled perversely. Amaterasu was going to give their Naruto-kun a night to remember. For the past week, Naruto had been getting ready for his date with Amaterasu. He had bought/improved a small grilling pit that was powered by seals so he wouldn't have to carry charcoal or lighter fluid, and it also kept the smoke from interfering with their date. He sighed as he looked himself over in the mirror. He had decided for something a little more casual than before. He wore good black slacks with a stipe of closed-toed sandal and a rather plain black shirt, although it had the picture of one silver and one gold wolf snuggling each other on the back. He spied the clock and smiled. It was time to pick up his date. Meanwhile, at the Namikaze compound, Amaterasu was dressed in a splendid silver dress that had 2 spaghetti straps over her shoulders, leaving most of her upper breasts and cleavage open to the world. It only reached to mid-calf and she had on some black high heels. She had allowed the girls to do her hair, which was actually put up to look like a silver sun, but all of this wasn't really on her mind. All week she had been hot and bothered. Now normally, this wouldn't be a problem as she would just go into seclusion and wait out her heat period. However, she knew this wasn't her heat period and she was, without reason, extremely horny. It actually pissed her off as she couldn't relieve herself alone, Anytime she tried to do so and it only seemed to make it worse. Little did she know that Hikari had pulled in a favor from Inari and gotten her hands on some god-level aphrodisiacs, well that in Anko's natural aphrodisiacs were to die for. Simply put, the three plotters had done everything possible to make Amaterasu so horny she'd have no choice but to use Naruto to relieve herself of her frustration, and her virginity. They all giggled perversely, but Hikari more than the others. They all noticed Naruto coming up the walkway and smirked. This was gonna be a night he'd happily enjoy. Amaterasu noticed Naruto ring the doorbell and looked at herself in the mirror once more, smoothing out her dress and pulling a see-through shawl around her shoulders before heading down the stairs and opening the door. Naruto smiled brightly at her and eyed her with very appreciative eyes. "You look magnificent, Megami-hime," he said softly as he offered her his arm. Amaterasu smiled as she quickly grabbed it and subconsciously rubbed herself against his arm. "Only for you, Naruto-kun," she said softly as the two took off down the walkway and out of the grounds, neither noticing the pair of eyes following them in secret. They took their time, but arrived in the same clearing that Naruto had set up for Yujito just as the sun was going down. Naruto was glad he had sent a clone ahead to cook their food. They watched it for a time, completely silent after they sat down, and Amaterasu rested her head on Naruto's shoulder, using it as an excuse to take deep whiffs of his strong masculine scent. She sighed in contentment as it was enough to help her appease the heat growing in her loins. Unfortunately she knew it would return, and only stronger than before. She absent-mindedly thought of canceling the date, but she threw that thought out as soon as it entered her mind. She wanted to be here, with Naruto. She never noticed it, but with each inhale, she subconsciously rubbed her thighs together. Naruto, on the other hand, could smell Amaterasu's increasing arousal, and it was playing havoc with his senses. His cock was practically rigid in his pants. "Is she really that attracted to me? Or is she in heat or something?" he asked himself. He sighed as he tried to return it to a relaxed state, and failed horribly as he heard Amaterasu inhale deeply next to him. He nearly groaned in disappointment when his clone dispersed, telling him that the chicken he had been barbecuing was ready, and he smiled softly at Amaterasu. "The food is ready, Ami-chan," he said softly, earning a disappointed groan from the gods, but she complied when he shifted and they scooted back to grab their plates of food. It was a rather simple dinner, just some chicken and potatoes, along with some green tea as Amaterasu didn't like sake. He smiled as he saw her nearly inhale the food. "Is it really that good, Ami-chan?" he asked with mirth in his eyes. Amaterasu blinked owlishly before a blush crept up her face. "Crap, I can't believe I was rushing just to jump him. Geez, am I really that horny?" she asked herself as she slowed her pace. With Amaterasu actually enjoying his food, Naruto chuckled and went back to his own dinner. For some reason, neither of them were in the mood to talk, so instead they ate in silence. However, they kept stealing glances at one another when the other wasn't looking. Soon enough, however, the food was gone and Naruto laid back patting his full stomach. "That was good," he said. "Lemon. Do not read if you are underage. Please skip to the third bold line." Amaterasu giggled and blushed. "Screw it. I already wanted to be with him, and this is the perfect chance," she thought as the once stoic goddess decided to give in to her lust for once. She suddenly jumped on top of Naruto, putting her hands on his chest and grinding her hips into his, causing his eyes to bulge. "I know something that will make it even better," she said huskily. Naruto had no time to react as the hot goddess smashed her lips hungrily into Naruto's own. He struggled for only a moment before kissing back passionately and flipping the sun goddess onto her back, not that she was complaining. He smirked down at her as he ran a hand down her body to between her legs, causing her to gasp in pleasure. "You really are horny, aren't you, Ami-chan? You're so sensitive you gasped just from touching through your clothes," he said. Amaterasu blushed a red that would make Hinata proud, but what Naruto did next really got her going. He leaned down and whispered into her ear as he pressed his hand against her wet sex. "I won't even have to prepare you, it looks like we can get straight to the main event," Naruto whispered huskily. Amaterasu moaned in approval as he ran his hand up her lips through her clothes. Suddenly, she glared at him. "You will fuck me now or I'll burn those balls off and use them myself," she said with anger and lust apparent in her eyes. Naruto chuckled as he pulled Amaterasu's dress off her body and viewed her sopping wet snatch. "I think I'll indulge you, Megami-hime, but maybe you should help me out of my clothes first," he said teasingly. Amaterasu growled playfully as she quickly undressed him and spread her legs. "Quit jerking me around," she said fearfully. Naruto raised an eyebrow, she really gives in to her feral side when she lets herself loose, he thought as he realized years of pent-up sexual activity came to the surface. That was fine with Naruto, after all, he'd be screwing his newest lover into a coma if he had anything to say about it. He smirked and lined himself up with her entrance, Amaterasu eagerly wrapping her arms around his neck for better access as he eased himself into her tight love canal. Amaterasu's eyes rolled as he entered her and she thanked herself for getting rid of that pesky hymen situation years ago when she simply removed it from her body. His 10-inch cock was easily stretching her in ways her hands could never fulfill, and she loved every second of it. He felt like a giant metal heating rod that caused her aching pussy to throb pleasurably while it stretched to accommodate his girth. Oh no. She was not regretting giving in to her desires tonight. Naruto, on the other hand, gasped as he entered the sun goddess. She certainly lived up to that name as her pussy felt like a furnace, not unpleasurably hot mind you, but hotter than any of his girls so far, and he was pretty sure hotter than any other girl he would ever meet. He could feel her pussy throb around his cock and smirked as he watched Amaterasu's eyes roll and some drool escape her mouth. Naruto paused as he fully entered her with a small grunt, before shifting himself and beginning to saw a good 7 inches in and out of his newest lover. Amaterasu's eyes clouded with lust as she raised her hips to meet Naruto's thrusts. She could feel Naruto's cock easily hit her cervix with every thrust and she happily aided in his attempts to paint her insides white. Due to Amaterasu's sex-deprived life, and the aphrodisiacs, she was quickly approaching climax and she attempted to clench her pussy walls around Naruto to bring him to orgasm as well. She noticed he didn't seem fazed in the slightest until she got a devious idea and her canine attributes took physical form. She had her tail come around and squeeze his balls as he thrust into her hot, wet hole. This caused Naruto's eyes to widen and his pleasure to increase phenomenally. In a short time, the combined actions caused both of the wolfish lovers to climax spectacularly, with Naruto thrusting balls deep into his newest lover. Amaterasu's eyes rolled in pleasure as Naruto growled softly and thrust balls deep into her pussy, hitting her G-spot and cervix in one thrust, causing an intense orgasm to rock her body and spots to form in her vision. She felt him pierce her innermost cavern and moaned loudly as she felt the hot cum of her lover fill her most holy place. She felt her cervix actually massage his cockhead as he put more and more of his baby batter into her oven, and mentally encouraged her body to continue its magnificent ministrations. She was barely aware that he had captured her lips in a passionate kiss, but she was by no means shy in returning the affection her first, and only if she had anything to say about it, lover. Naruto had growled as he thrust into his lover and quickly followed with a passionate kiss as he felt Amaterasu's wet cavern become almost unbearably hot. Not to say she wasn't tight as all hell either though. He moaned into her mouth as he felt his cum erupt from his cock like it was a volcano, and the way her cervix seemed to pulse around the head of his cock just before he deposited his next shot served only to prolong his orgasm. He moaned into Amaterasu's mouth as his last shot of cum was thrust into her womb and let his body relax as his orgasm subsided. He slowly came down from his orgasm and accessed his celestial chakra and bit Amaterasu's should while whispering, "Mine," as he softened inside of his goddess, giving her the same golden wolf figure on her shoulder. Amaterasu smiled as she came down from her own orgasm, and felt her body actually begin to heat up again as he bit her shoulder and claimed her. She quickly returned the favor and bit him on the same mark Hikari and Anko had given him, his right shoulder. Her own figure of a golden sun appeared behind the two previous figures, although a silver wolf joined the two animals in front of the sun. Naruto slowly extracted himself from his goddess before giving her a soft smile. "How was it?" he asked, hoping she enjoyed it as much as him. Amaterasu smirked and flipped them so she was on top, letting herself fall and grind against Naruto's body. "It was exciting," she said huskily as she leant into his ear, "but I hope you don't think we're done, 'cause I still have much more room," she whispered into his ear as she specifically rubbed her stomach against his. Naruto immediately caught on to what she meant and his erection returned full force, pushing against Amaterasu's thigh as she ground her body against his. Amaterasu smirked as she saw his eyes beginning to cloud in lust and she swiftly got off of him only to turn around on the blanket and get on her hands and knees presenting him with her backside, her tail straight up. Naruto looked at her confused for only a second until he saw a bit of juice leak from her thoroughly moistened love canal. He growled softly as she turned her head and smiled seductively while shaking her ass as an invitation. He quickly got on his knees and rubbed his head over her swollen nether lips before thrusting into her, fully sheathing himself in the hot cavern of his goddess. He moaned in appreciation as her hole stretched to accommodate his girth once again. He bent over her back and let his own celestial features show. He licked her neck, causing a shiver to run down her spine and her walls to clench pleasurably around his cock. She turned her head to the side and engaged in a passionate kiss before breaking away as Naruto smirked at his lover. "I'm gonna fuck you till you pass out, Megami-hime. I hope you enjoy it," he stated as he pulled almost all the way out before bringing their hips back together with the lewd sound of skin slapping against skin. Amaterasu moaned as her lover roughly fucked her hot hole, and she loved every second of it. While their original position had allowed Naruto to reach the entrance to her most holy place, it hadn't been quite enough for him to hit it with every thrust. This position, however, had the dual effect of allowing Naruto to hit her cervix and hitting her G-spot with every thrust. Needless to say, Amaterasu was very pleased, and Naruto could tell simply by how loud she moaned and how hot her pussy was around his cock. It seemed that Amaterasu's pussy got hotter the more she enjoyed the sex, perk of being the sun goddess Naruto guessed. Naruto growled softly in appreciation as he thrust himself again and again into his newest lover. He had grown used to the unnatural amount of heat that Amaterasu produced, and it did nothing but turn him on even more, as he could easily tell just how much Amaterasu was enjoying his loving. He loved how she kept heating up as she got closer and closer to her orgasm, which easily encouraged his own release. Needless to say, seeing as Amaterasu's pussy got hotter and hotter with every thrust, it wasn't long before Naruto buried himself in his lover for the second time that night as he half-howled his release into the night. Amaterasu let out a half-scream, half-howl as Naruto buried himself inside of her, forcing her cervix open and pumping even more cum into her womb. She instantly came, her own orgasm striking through her body like lightning. She felt her womb throbbing, pulsing around his cock head and spurring him on to get the creamy reward it had worked so hard to get. She saw spots in her vision and just smiled in contentment as she felt him fully fill her womb before pulling back and shooting his last stream of cum into her love canal, truly painting her pussy white. Naruto howled his release as he pierced his lover's womb for the second time that night, fully intent on giving her the seed she so obviously wished for. Her pussy had tightened considerably around his cock, and he could feel her womb throbbing around his cock head, once again prolonging his orgasm to new heights. His cock throbbed as he happily supplied the warm liquid to his lover's sacred hole, pulling back only to have his last shot spurt and cover her pussy in white. Amaterasu didn't move as Naruto sat down on his haunches, panting from his orgasm. She had her eyes closed and was enjoying the feeling of having her sex filled with the seed of the only man she would ever allow to plant it there. She was enjoying the glow of after sex for a good 5 minutes when, suddenly, her eyes shot open as a finger entered her ass and she moaned almost as loud as she had when she orgasmed just a few minutes ago. She looked over her shoulder only to see Naruto fingering her wet ass. "Ami-chan. Your ass is lubricated," Naruto half-asked as he continued his pleasuring of his goddess. Amaterasu blushed and nodded. "Wolves have sex through the ass," she said, getting louder as he hit a good spot in her ass. "So, of course I'm lubricated," she continued. She noticed him staring at her ass in a bit of awe before the aphrodisiacs hit her again, and she smirked fiercely. "Naruto-kun," she said, getting his attention with the seductive hint to his name. She wiggled her ass, with his finger still in it. "Care to fuck my ass?" she asked, smirking. Naruto was a bit taken aback that she not only had the stamina to go yet again, but also that she was asking for him to fuck her ass, something he hadn't experienced yet. He removed his finger and set himself up to enter her ass. Amaterasu let her arms fail and stuck her ass up in the air, her tail again straight up as she offered herself to him again. Naruto stroked himself back to full length and bent close to her. "Are you sure?" he asked. Amaterasu smirked and gave him a quick kiss before nodding. Naruto smiled softly and slowly slid his way into her tight ass. Naruto savored the different feeling of sliding into his newest mate's ass. It was definitely tighter than any of his other lovers' pussies, but it had a different feel as well. It was tightest at the base, but the pressure lessened after that until about another 3 inches in where it tightened again. Luckily, as Amaterasu said, her ass was thoroughly lubricated and he slid in easily. He groaned as he bottomed out. "God Megami-hime, you're so tight," he grunted out as he attempted to adjust to this newest sensation. Amaterasu moaned in delight as her ass was spread wide by Naruto's well-endowed cock. She heard his comment, but didn't respond and instead rolled her hips back in a sign to start moving. Naruto took the hint and started off slow, not wanting to hurt his lover. Amaterasu appreciated it as she felt Naruto thoroughly violate her ass again and again, not that she was objecting, mind you. Her ass felt like it was on fire as he slid his member between her cheeks and into her other hole, A pleasurable fire that is. Naruto continued his thrusts for several minutes before he felt his release approaching, and by the way Amaterasu's ass was clenching around his cock, so was hers. He smirked as he thought of a devious way to finish her off. He leaned forward as he continued to push himself deep into his lover's rectum. "I'm gonna fill your ass with my cum, Ami-chan, try and hold it in for me will you?" he said huskily into her ear as his own tail furiously brushed against her nether lips and his balls slapped against them. Amaterasu's eyes widened and she howled her release as Naruto thrust himself deep inside her ass and let loose yet another torrent of cum. Her juices, and some of Naruto's, spilled down her legs as her eyes rolled in her head as she felt the third orgasm of the night rock through her body. As her howl subsided, she continued to moan whilst Naruto was still connected to her hips from behind. She was one very satisfied goddess, and she would definitely seek a repeat of tonight. Naruto moaned loudly as his cock spilled yet more of his seed into Amaterasu's willing hole. Her ass was clenched tightly around his cock and he was happy to hear her howl so loud as he pumped her stomach full of cum. He could honestly say that this was the longest he had ever gone with any of his lovers, but that didn't mean that he was done. He felt a pulse from his avatar mark and leaned forward only to bite Amaterasu on her own mate mark. The result was something neither expected, but both would love. Warning. The following scene contains bestial sex, as in Naruto and Amaterasu both in wolf form. Please skip to the following bold line if you do not wish to read. Amaterasu felt a flood of celestial chakra enter her mark and change her body from her human form to her animal form, the silver fox with bright blue lines running through her body. She twisted her canine head only to see Naruto, in his own magnificent golden wolf form, still inserted in her tight canal. She felt him growing hard and smirked. She swiftly started grinding her ass into his growing erection and was promptly rewarded with a lustful growl from her, now, canine companion. "Still not satisfied, my Megami Hime?" Naruto asked as his erection returned full force, easily filling Amaterasu's love hole. Amaterasu mentally chuckled and rocked her hips back into his again, earning yet another playfully lustful growl. "Just shut up and fuck me again, Naruto-kun," she responded. Naruto chuckled as he shifted to get a better position in his new form. "Gladly, Ami-chan," he responded as his first thrust met her hips. Amaterasu let out a howl of approval as Naruto began to pound into her body for the fourth time that night. Their hips met several times in rapid-fire thrusts as Naruto and Amaterasu attempted to receive yet another orgasm from their lover. Naruto was furiously pounding his well-endowed cock into Amaterasu's tight, wet, hot hole and she was doing her best to ensure that Naruto needed do nothing more than continue his blistering pace to achieve their release. To Naruto, Amaterasu's new form was just as stunning as her human one. The blue lines running through her fur entranced his wolf-like eyes. They seemed to dance and shift every time he thrust into his lover, making him want to fuck her even more with an almost hypnotic effect. He continued to pound into his lover for a good 20 minutes before his orgasm began to bubble up from his balls and begin to make itself known to him. To Amaterasu, having sex in this form wasn't that much different than her human one, however she had to admit that Naruto made a stunning wolf. She had often glanced back at him as he pounded into her body and was pleased with the sight she had seen. His chest was muscled, just like his human one, his teeth sharp, his eyes the bright electric blue she had come to love, and the long tongue that hung out of his mouth as he continued to give her pleasure she hadn't considered existed. She felt him harden and impale himself into her body and let loose a howl as she felt the beginnings of his orgasm, and her own. Naruto howled to the moon as his cock went rigid inside his lover and started to pour his hot cum into her tight hole. At the base of his cock, a large swelling occurred and tied the two lovers together, as well as not allowing any of Naruto's juices to spill from Amaterasu's body. He moaned as he felt her pussy massage his cock and prolong his orgasm, just as her womb had done earlier that night. He half collapsed on her back as his knot kept them from moving away from one another. Amaterasu howled in pleasure and her body finally succumbed to the pleasure it had been subjected to all night. She felt Naruto's cock go rigid and the large knot that stretched her hole as well as keeping the two from moving. She even felt her pussy massage Naruto's cock, but as his cum poured into her womb for the third time that day, and her own orgasm hit for the fourth, she passed out from sheer pleasure. Needless to say, she was smiling as much as a wolf could as she snuggled her ass a little closer to her lover. Naruto mentally smirked as he noticed that Amaterasu had passed out from the pleasure. "Well, I did promise to fuck her till she passed out," he thought with mirth. He stayed tied to his lover for a good 30 minutes before his knot receded and he pulled out of his canine lover, only for her to revert to her human form and curl into a ball. He readied himself to change back when he felt a finger press itself into his back, near his tail, before a bolt of energy ran up and down his spine, ending in his balls and cock, leaving him 100% erect yet again. He turned around only to come snout to ass with 9 tails and a foxy ass being shaken sexily at him. It seems that Hikari wanted a piece of the action, and Naruto was all too happy to oblige. He quickly mounted his foxy lover and thrust balls deep into her slick tight hole. "Hikari-chan, you're fucking sexy as a vixen, you know that?" Naruto asked as he began to pound into his alpha mate. Hikari mewed under his actions and smirked over her shoulder, as much as she could anyways. "Yes, I know it, Naruto-kun. Do you enjoy fucking me in this form?" she asked as he furiously continued to please his mate. Naruto's tongue hung from his mouth as he panted in pleasure. "I do, you're so slim and streamlined. You ass is smaller than Ami-chan's but tighter, and you definitely know how to shake it." "But I don't know if I have it in me to go for more than once, Hikari-chan," he replied a bit sadly. Hikari panted as she felt her end fast approaching. Something about Naruto being attracted to her fox form was making this go a bit faster than expected, but not in a bad way. That's fine. I was sorta watching you too and couldn't help myself," she replied, admitting her indecent act. Naruto barked out a laugh as his own end approached. "Next time, don't hide. It'd be fucking sexy to see you masturbate while I'm screwing another of our mates," he replied as he thrust particularly deep into Hikari's ass and let out a howl as his cock spewed forth its cream into Hikari's willing hole. Hikari smirked as she felt Naruto fill her womb with his cum and let loose her own howl of pleasure as his knot returned and spread her lips to their max as his body tied itself to hers. Naruto snuggled into her shoulder and she smirked. "I will do that. But enough of that. I'm tired, and as soon as your little friend goes away, we are sleeping with Ami-chan," she said. Naruto just growled lightly in agreement and snuggled closer, awaiting his sleep time. It was close to midnight when his knot faded and the two lovers turned human, picked up Amaterasu, and swiftly shunshined back home to sleep, Naruto in the middle, Amaterasu snuggled to his left, and Hikari snuggled to his right. Lemon end. Thank you. Namikaze Estates, next day. Amaterasu's eyes opened and she groaned as she felt extreme soreness in her legs and both her holes. Suddenly the events the night prior reached the forefront of her mind and she realized that she was snuggled up with the man who had claimed her as his mate just last night. She noticed Hikari's scent in the bed, but the shower was running so she assumed she was there. She slowly got up only to notice that Naruto had concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. Amaterasu hugged the sheets to her chest and smiled before kissing him lightly on the lips. "I'm fine, Teo-kun. Son, how are you?" she asked, smiling softly. Naruto smiled back. "I'm quite well, thanks for asking." "You really wore me out last night," he replied honestly. Amaterasu blushed but still smiled. "Get used to it. We have centuries of catching up to do, Koi," she said. Naruto was a bit taken aback but kissed her softly again. "Whatever you want, Megami-hime," he replied smirking. Amaterasu giggled. "Good answer, but you have training with Kushina-san, so get out of here," she said. Naruto frowned but sighed and nodded before getting out of bed and grabbing his clothes, entering the bathroom just as Hikari exited it. Hikari smirked at Amaterasu and opened her mouth, but shut it immediately after as Amaterasu glared at her when Naruto left the room. "Get whatever girls were involved with this downstairs for breakfast, or so help me I will rip you all to shreds," she said angrily. Hikari gaped for a second before humping and walking out of the room to gather her co-conspirators. Amaterasu stretched and winced at the pain in her legs. She sighed and used a minor healing jutsu so she could walk with a limp. She could have just willed it away, but she'd be damned if the girls didn't know she'd had the best night of her life with her Teo-kun. 3 hours later, Hana, Hikari, Anko, Amaterasu, and Yujito were sitting at the table. Yujito had joined them but she didn't really know what was going on. She just wanted to know how Naruto was in bed, considering Nibi wouldn't shut up about Amaterasu's limp. Amaterasu sighed and took a sip of her tea before glaring at the three culprits. "You know, if I hadn't already wanted to sleep with him and if he hadn't blown my mind last night, I'd make you all experience life as a leech for a few weeks. I figured it out about halfway through last night," she said harshly. Hikari, Anko, and Hana shared a look before turning back to Amaterasu and sticking out their tongues saying, "Nya," before they all busted out laughing. Hana wiped a tear from her eye before focusing on Naruto's newest mate. "So, just how mind-blowing was he last night?" she asked smirking, causing Yujito to lean in a bit closer than the others. Amaterasu considered not telling them, but noticed Yujito so decided to spare them her wrath. She relaxed and her eyes took a faraway look. He screwed me 4 times, and I loved every second of it. God, I had to work to get him to orgasm at the same time as me, she said. Yujito and Hana had blushes, but Hikari and Anko just giggled perversely. He really is good, isn't he? Hikari asked. Getting a nod from the goddess, she smirked, and Naruto's 3 mates reminisced their times with Naruto. Yujito blushed but leaned forward and smirked deviously. I want details, she said. Naruto's mates smirked before Hana and Yujito found themselves having to relieve some tension in the bathroom following their descriptions. Time skip, 2 weeks, Chunin exam day. Team 10 approached the academy with high hopes and confidence. They knew they were ready for these exams and were confident in passing any test these instructors could throw their way. Ino and Shino were easily Chunin level, and Naruto was nearing Sunin level himself. But they didn't let that go to their heads. Speaking of Shino, Hinata had been seen around him almost as much as she had been seen watching Naruto, not that the bug boy complained or denied it. The team soon entered the building and were instructed to report to the front desk. The secretary looked at the team with boredom and asked for their team name, which they gave and were assigned to report to room 229. They looked at one another and shrugged, heading up the stairs and to their assigned classroom. They quickly arrived and took in the competition. There was a sound team, an unknown as it was a new village, a rain team, some teams from various smaller countries, and one team from Leaf, but they seemed far too old to be genin. Naruto and his team silently made their way into a corner to await their exam and observe the enemy. Sound seemed to be mad at everything and everyone. The rain team reminded Naruto of Might Guy and Rock Lee just without green or the bushy eyebrows. Most of the other teams were insignificant, although there was one team from Waterfall that caught Naruto's attention. Pretty soon, however, a poof of smoke appeared at the front of the classroom. All right, you maggots, listen up and shut up, came the voice of someone Naruto knew very well, considering the man was the best male friend of one of his mates. Naruto smirked. Oi, Scarface. You ain't trying to scare me again, are ya? He asked. Ibiki blinked as he took in Naruto before turning and glaring at the nearby Chunin with a clipboard. Why the hell didn't you tell me Uzumaki was here? He asked angrily. The Chunin cowered for a moment before Ibiki huffed. Never mind. Just listen up. I'm going to explain the rules of this competition, he said as the rest of the ninjas focused their attention on the black-clad Jounin. You must all find 2 scrolls, 1 heaven, 1 earth. You will find some basic information in the packets being handed out to your team when I am finished explaining the rules. Everyone has the same basic clues, but each team has one specific clue that the other teams in this room doesn't have. You will have 12 hours to find the 2 scrolls from the time the test begins to the end. There will be no fighting allowed between teams at this time. Am I understood? He asked, getting nods from the gathered teams. Ibiki smirked. Good, get your packets and get ready, the exam begins in 10 minutes, he said.